Okay, looking good. Well, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Excellent. Good seeing you guys. Kosei,
Hi.
good seeing you, sir.
Good to see
Is this your last one?
This is my last one.
Last class. How's it
Last
feel?
class. What?
How's that feel?
Well, it would be nice to be able to study more.
Okay.
Here.
Well, you'll be able to do that. So what I say is counseling, if you're doing counseling, it's a lifelong learning
I
thing.
know.
And things change so much
Yeah.
in counseling, and there's always something new to learn, always new theories coming out,
Yeah.
especially. I think they all build upon themselves. So they'll take one theory and then they'll just add something new, and then, hey, it's this whole brand new cool thing, and they get credit for it and all that stuff too. But yeah, a lot of good information out there. And then there's some others that you really got to be careful with. So, yeah. Well, to get started, would one of you want to pray for our class today? And then,
And,
Okay.
well, praying in English is so hard.
Okay, I got it.
okay,
I got it.
and then we'll
Yeah.
kind of get started.
You bet.
Okay, thank you.
Dear God, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for your glory. We just pray that we can worship and honor you today with our lives. And just help center us. Help us to prepare our minds and our hearts to receive your wisdom today. And I just pray for Doug, Father, that you will bless him and give him the words and the wisdom that he needs to say to us today. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
One question. Did
Yes.
you send out some link, like live link to for like online students?
Well, no, it's just really kind of going to be on here. You're talking about the presentations?
No. The
For YouTube?
online students should be able to watch.
Yeah, they're on now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But without link, they cannot access it.
Right, they're on now.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, you got my back. I know, I appreciate that. Okay, so my name is Doug Geiger, and I work with Jeff Cox here at Calvary, and also at Abundant Life. So I'm the director of the counseling center, and Jeff's my boss there. He's the wellness pastor. He's got a lot going on at Abundant Life, so it's just a privilege to work with him and all the stuff that he does at Abundant Life. And he's just an amazing person in the first place. He's just fun to be with and very smart, one of the smartest guys I know. So here's what I'm going to do too. So I liked what Jeff did before. I'm going to give my phone number out, and I know that you can text on YouTube if anybody has a question or anything like that too, as you watch. And I know there's a little bit of a delay here, but I'm going to give my phone number out, and if you guys want to text during this time, you can text, and maybe that's, maybe that'll alert me, because if I put up the presentation on here, it kind of takes up the whole screen, and sometimes I won't see if somebody's asking a question. So my phone number is 816-721-0355. 816-721-0355. Okay, I appreciate it. And text me anytime with any questions that you may have. So try to get those answered for you. So kind of wanted just to introduce myself a little bit and kind of tell, my story of how I got into counseling. And I know that everybody's going to have a story of how they get into counseling or use counseling as a pastor, or however you're going to use what you learn in this school, in these classes. So I kind of started off in technology in the day when technology was pretty big. I know it's big now, but I worked at a Cerner Corporation for about 12 years, and I was a manager of people there. And I had about 15 to 17 people at a time that I was managing, and these were all salespeople. So, during this time, I would kind of interview them and say, hey, I want them to be the best that they can be, in not only at Cerner, but in their life and in their marriages and things like that too. And sometimes they were in a position that maybe wasn't the best for them, and I just wanted to help them figure that out as well. But if they were in this position, it was really good. I wanted them to really understand that the vision that they had for their lives and that God had for their lives too, right? So, some people were motivated by money. Some people were motivated by, having security in their family. Other people were motivated by awards and things like that too. So I wanted to really work through what motivated people in their lives and help them achieve those things. So I found I was doing a lot of counseling, if you will, coaching, counseling, things like that too. And I found, once that you took an interest in their lives and they felt like that you had their back, they were really productive, and and they would go to war for you too. So they would do, but I mean they were very appreciative, when it came time that their families and stuff like that too, because they really understood what their mission was in life and what their vision for their life was. So, and what I liked about it too is really a great ministry opportunity in a corporation and a corporate environment to be able to talk to people about, purpose in their life and what God's purpose was in their life too, and how we're created in His image and we're meant to reproduce ourselves into others and things like that too. So it was a good deal. So the next move that I did was, I did a lot of traveling at Cerner and all that, and it's just kind of got tiring, and I got to a place where I didn't want to do as much traveling and all that, so I went into real estate. Can you guys guess what year I went into real estate?
Oh gosh, 2007?
2007, right at the end in November. And guess what happened in 2008, right? The big crash. So, but here's the thing. My wife and I, we prayed about it. We discussed, even before the crash and all that, hey, this is where God wants us in here, and this is our, part of our ministry too in business, is we get to talk to a lot of different people. So we just we had that trust, and then the market crashed, and here's the thing, God took care of us during that whole time. My wife's still doing real estate. When I got into the real estate part, they asked me to run the office, to manage the office there, because I'd had some management experience and all that stuff too. And so the office that I was in was getting ready to go bankrupt. We had about 50 real estate agents left, and it was about ready to go under, and the ownership was, this was their last effort. Well, we came in, and I did the exact same thing at Cerner in here, and I took interest in people, and other people outside of that could see that, hey, the people at this office that I was in, hey, these people were different. And we would do Bible studies, and we would pray before team meetings, and everybody in there, for the most part, were pretty devout Christians, and so we attracted that, and you could just see how God grew that business at that time, and we made it through the bad time. So I say all that to say, hey, we put our trust in God, and He showed out for us, and it was a way that we could give back just by working with other people and showing our ministry and who we were in their lives too as well. So during that time, I interviewed a lot of people and coached and all this stuff too, but it was always bringing it back to some form of coaching or counseling in their lives, so I just kept seeing that over and over and over again, where God was just showing me, hey, this is something that I want you to do, So I did that for a while, and then I went to a local university here and went through their Masters of Arts in Counseling program. And then you have to do an internship, and I did my internship at Abundant Life. Loved it so much, I've been there ever since. So started there, and now just kind of worked my way to being the director there. But just the counseling aspect in my life has just showed me, that we need connection. Everybody, we just long for connection in some way. I deal with a lot of couples. I mean, I think that's where I really migrated to, because I really wanted people to have great marriages, and so I kind of migrated towards that and worked with couples, and just, there was just little tweaks that they would need, so it's been pretty rewarding. But I've seen a lot of things, and I could tell you a lot of stories, and maybe we'll get into some of those today. But in some of the things, I'm like, wow, now I've heard everything, right? Type of things, right? And so when you get into counseling, you're going to hear a lot about pain in people's lives, and how they do need that connection of somebody, and to walk through this pain with them. It kind of takes me back to Job, everything that happened to Job, and he had the 3 friends come over, right? Let me ask you this. So what was the best part of those 3 friends coming over? It was them just sitting with him.
Yeah.
They didn't say a word, they didn't have to say a word or anything like that. They just sat with him, so that's sometimes just what people need, is just to know that somebody cares about them, that connection. They don't need people to solve their problems. They can solve their own problems. And a lot of people will ask for advice and things like that too, and that's okay. But they have the best answers for their lives, and it's just helping them to come across that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you guys have any questions of me, or anybody online have questions?
How long have you been at Abundant Life?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So he asked how long I've been at Abundant Life. Did my internship there in 2013, so 8 years.
Cool.
A little, almost 9 years now. So your internship, where I was from, you got to do about 1,000 hours of internship there. And so yeah, I did mine all at Abundant Life, and it's really grown. We have probably 35 to close to 40 counselors there now, and it's really grown. And we just kind of look at it as a training ground. So here's another part. I mean, you'll learn a lot in school about theory and things like that too, but it's really the doing that you need. And the most important part is having a great supervisor too, during this time. And having, Kosei sat through some of the meetings that I had with some of our counselors there, and it's really, just how I handle my supervision is I will ask them, hey, what's going on in your life now that's maybe prohibiting you from connecting with people at 100%? So we just kind of work through, and sometimes it's counseling a counselor, at times. Other times it's, hey, I'm good. I need to talk about my cases. So the second thing is we work on cases and things like that too. So what's going on in that? What can we do to, help that person? We'll do some research together, watch some videos, go through the DSM on, diagnosing and things like that too.
Collaboration.
Lots of collaboration. I mean, really,
That's cool.
Here's the thing. So once you get into counseling, if you get into private practice, it could be a lonely place because you won't have a bunch of people around you like you will at, like at Abundant Life, where you'll have a lot of counselors there. So I just really say, get into a place where you can do a lot of collaboration with people. And if you can't do it at that office, find groups where you can do that. because that's where you're going to learn. And it's not only that, it's the mental support that you're going to get from others too as well. Yeah.
I
So,
appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely. So we go through the collaboration part, just like you said. And then the third thing I go through is how do we prepare for their next sessions? So they walk into each session with that confidence, hey, I've got this, and I've got what this looks like, and a plan put together and things like that too. So we'll go through what a treatment plan looks like, and how to get the information from the people, and all that stuff too, so to help them at their best. Okay? Any other questions before we kind of get started? Well, I know I talked to Jeff about, kind of what he went through, and Kevin, you told me that you guys went through some of the DSM yesterday. So I have about 2 or 3 different disorders and things like that we'll go through. But I want to spend a lot of time on what the interview looks like and how to get the information that we need. Because you guys can read the DSM, and there's a lot to it. I think that we do diagnose people. The DSM was kind of written for people who will be using third-party payers and things like that, so insurance. And then this is another way for us to work with medical doctors and things like that too. So it is a good bridge, and it does teach us a lot of good things, but the real work is when we're with the clients and things like that too, and getting the proper information that we need. So we'll go through that as well. Okay. Okay, so first one we'll just kind of go through our eating disorders. Well, let me take a kind of a step back. One thing that I did love that Jeff went through, I think was on the first day, is one of his first slides, is kind of his leadership aspect of it. Like one question that he had is, am I well? Mm-hmm. And, we see, and I've worked and talked with people, counselors, and even supervised some that, hey, you know what, they weren't well at the time. And we really had to do some work that, to kind of figure out, because if they're not well, how can we be, or if I'm not well, how can I be well for my clients? Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing, we're doing them a disservice, and their family a disservice, and everybody around them. So I love that aspect of it, is, that question is, am I well? Also, how do I make others feel? If I'm sitting in a room, one of the things that I want them to feel is safety, security. I want them to have that connection with me, and I'll do everything up front. Here's one thing that I see is a lot of counselors get into working with people, and they've already got the mindset of wanting to help people, and they put that pressure on themselves to fix. They just want to fix. People just want to be connected with. And I know, and I want people to have, all this knowledge and get to, the point of when they're working with somebody, but man, making that connection with the people, that are sitting right across from you is the most important part. Because when I do the supervision, they're like going, I'm just not reaching them. And I'm like, what session are you on? What was my first one? I'm like, yeah, these people are coming in, and they may have never been in counseling before, and they don't know what to expect. So that first session for them is just them getting their bearings on what counseling even is, So it might take 2, 3, 4 sessions before you really get that connection with them. But they're, them as counselors, God bless them, they want to go in there and fix, and I'm like going, no, we have to have establish that connection. So how do I make others feel? I want them to have that safety, security, and connection with me for sure. And then how will I connect with them? Because there's going to be times, you're going to be sitting with them and they are so hurt and things are going on and they're having triggers in their life that they don't want to connect with others because they don't feel that safety and security. I think Jeff went through trauma yesterday. Did he? Okay. So if you think about trauma, if people have trauma in their life, it causes anxiety, depression, and all kinds of other things too. And anxiety and depression are two things that we want to separate from, and sometimes being in solitude is the way that people do separate from that, okay? And then the last thing he says was who will I bring along, And I think that really, to me, that's the most important part, because when you do counsel somebody and you do help them in a system, it's like discipleship, right? We want to create disciples and recreate ourselves into others so that they can go and do the same thing. So who will I bring along? And I'm hoping that, I'm doing my job well enough that they're going to bring their family along in their health and their husband, wife, whatever, and make disciples of others and have them be healthy people too, healthy Christians especially. Yeah. Any questions there? Okay. Okay, so the first one, so eating disorders. So as you guys think about eating disorders, what comes to mind? What comes to mind when you think about eating disorders?
Anorexia, bulimia, the majors.
Yes.
I would say.
Yep, those are the two big ones, right?
I mean, generally, when diving a little bit deeper, probably into it, I would start thinking about more like that person's view of themselves. Who planted that seed in them that maybe deteriorated their worth.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great, yeah. And I think you'll find sometimes, we'll talk about this too, is sometimes we're predisposed to things too as well, from our family. So one thing that I do, and we'll talk about this in the interviewing portion, is we really just go through a lot of family history too to see, wow, because there's a lot of answers that we can get from the past, right? Mm-hmm. So that's great. Thank you for that. So there's, within the eating disorders, there's 4 different types of disorders in the DSM. So the first one is the anorexia, just like you talked about, and that's dietary restriction. So we limit food, okay? So bulimia is the next one. So there's binge eating with compensatory behavior, okay? So the and then there's binge eating disorder. We'll go through these. Binge eating disorder without compensatory behavior, and that is new to the DSM-5. The previous one, the DSM-4, they did a lot of changes, and I think there were like 10 years in between or more. Can't remember. I'll have to find that out. But there were a lot of years in between 4 and 5. But there were a lot of revisions and stuff like that too. So they added a lot, and then there's even more that they'll be adding for the next version, whenever that comes about. And then there's other specified feeding or eating disorders. So variants on the themes. So you've probably seen when you're working through the DSM-5 that there are the main disorders, and then there's other specified things with these disorders, right? So, comorbidity, it's always such a hard word to say. Comorbidity, meaning that they have 1, 2, 3 different types of disorders that are happening all at once, and maybe is one causing another, okay? So those are important. So eating disorders, so recent research indicates that several aspects of eating disorders can be understood as dimensional rather than categorical. So So with regard to the bulimia, right, and other disorders involving binge eating, both, like I said, so binge eating disorder, both taxonic and then binge eating episodes, and the dimensional part. So the dietary restraint, body dissatisfaction, and or drive for thinness, and that's kind of what you were saying earlier, right? Is the drive for thinness, right? And so how do I get there, right? And if you talk to some and you're working with them in the counseling room, and you can see that they're skinny and emaciated, is that, the bones coming through their skin, you can see that, but they still feel that they're fat, right? And that there's parts of their body that they want to keep working on, okay? So, the next is anorexia. So binge eating is eating in kind of a discrete period of time. So, they'll eat an amount of food that is definitely larger than most people would eat, and for them, if you'll kind of work and talk to them, it's like there's some void that's going on in their life too, that that food kind of gives them that feeling. If you talk to somebody who's maybe overweight or whatever, and their comfort is food, they call it comfort food, right? That their comfort is because there's some kind of void missing, and food allows them to feel, right? You'll have other people who cut and they just want to feel something differently or fulfilled, right? So definitely larger than most people would eat during a similar period of time, and then under similar circumstances and a sense of lack of control over their eating too as well. So that feeling of one that cannot stop or control their eating. So the severity of this disease is based on the body mass index. So that's when, if you were to go to a doctor, they would go over their body mass index, and so they could get the severity of how bad it is, okay? So mild disease having, BMI of greater than 17. So 17, and how they figure that out is your weight divided by how tall you are, okay? And then, so moderate would be 16 to 17, severe would be 15 to 16, and extreme BMI would be less than 15. So that's, and I don't know exactly, because it's not body percentage, body fat percentage, but body mass, okay? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, compensatory behaviors. So any behavior that is done in an attempt to get rid of consumed calories or to burn consumed calories. What would you think would be something you would include in this category?
Diet pills?
Yeah, diet pills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what else?
Any behaviors to get rid of them? I mean,
Yeah.
binging?
Binging, yep. Working out 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Mm-hmm. A lot of cardio.
Yeah.
Maybe even hitting the sauna.
Yeah, good one.
Maybe wearing extra layers of clothes.
Yeah,
Just because
to sweat.
you would be even.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking about cutting weight.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it applies.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Good. Yeah, so those are compensatory. And then purging behaviors. So only behaviors that are done in effort to get rid of consumed calories. So what does that look like?
Throwing out
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
forcefully.
Yeah. So the building blocks of these disorders, right? So body image, and you said that earlier, and it's about, what do I look like to others and to myself? I think a lot of it happens, when you're growing up, you can be in pageants and things like that too. And, this is, eating disorders are probably one of the highest disorders in women, So body image, what one believes and feels about themselves when looking in a mirror. So when assessing body image, clients will fall somewhere on the continuum of positive to negative. Somewhere in there, right? So sometimes they think positive, and a lot of times they can still think negative of that, even if they're at their ideal.
So, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Do they not really have any sort of goal? Or even when they hit their goal, they just then add another one?
Yes, and that could happen too.
Okay.
If you're talking to some, they could get to that, and they're like going, and so they may be worried about the future of gaining back.
Say not good enough.
Yeah, or
Okay.
when they look into the mirror and they see, and that isn't good enough, But what you really have to talk to them about is, where did that come from? Where have they heard these words, right? That you're not good enough, or your body's not good enough, or So it's really working through that negative mindset of themselves too. Yeah, very good question. Thank you. Make sure, okay. So here you go. Negative view of body image affects 80% of women, and then 40% of men. That's a huge,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people right there, right?
Yeah.
80% of women. And so it doesn't have to be all of their life, right? It's just at some points in your life, right? I look at myself, I'm thin, but I've got the middle-aged stuff right here on the handles and things like that I would love to get rid of.
Yeah. Now, I've heard some of that's hereditary. Like if
Yeah.
like my dad has the same problem with, like, say, love handles or what
Yeah.
have you, it's like, so is that accurate?
Yeah, I think,
Some places are.
body types and stuff like that too.
Okay.
Here's the funny thing is, my dad was 5'8" or 9", and I'm by 6'6" or 6'7", right? So, and he was, he had a gut on him, and he's just like a guy with a gut, and all that stuff too. So I look at that going, that could be me if I get to, a certain age, and I've really got to watch that because, I looked at what his body type was, and
Mhm.
I want to make sure that I protect against that, right? So, but I think, in most men, that's kind of where it goes anyway too. So, yeah, no, you're exactly right. So the eating disorder, anorexia, and bulimia respectively affect 0.5% and 2 to 3% of women over their lifetime. So bulimia, it's at 2 to 3%, and then anorexia is at 0.5%. So the most common age of onset is between 12 and 25. I think you're going to find by reading through most of these that besides the ones of the mind and things like that too, most of them you're going to see the onset of these disorders starting at an early age. Like schizophrenia is, if you don't have schizophrenia by the age of 20, in men generally around that age, you probably never get it, right, type of thing. So, so a lot of them happen, you'll find them in the younger, and maybe they get worse through age.
So that's where family history would be helpful
Mhm.
to detecting maybe what was going on at certain ages,
Absolutely.
to see if it's kind of been ongoing.
To me, family history is a huge part of it. You're going to find a lot of answers in the family history.
And are you able to contact family members then with permission?
Yeah, with permission.
Okay.
Yeah. There's been times that I would have them, or bring the person in, or whatever, and be able to talk about, things. Yeah.
With the other person or separate?
Well,
Either or?
I would do it with them in
Yeah.
the room, just so they didn't feel.
And maybe for confirmation purposes.
Yeah, exactly, confirmation, and then maybe that they didn't feel, that I was.
Overstepping.
Yeah, or Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's cool.
And then, although much more common in female, 10% of cases are detected in males. So it's not just with females, right? So it could be in with males too as well. 10%. So both anorexia and bulimia are characterized by an overvalued drive for thinness and disturbance in eating behavior. So the main difference between the diagnosis and anorexia, so if you had this question on your test when you go for licensure or any other test, here's the answer, right? The main difference between the diagnosis is that anorexia is a syndrome of self-starvation involving significant weight loss of 15% or more of ideal body weight. 15% or more of ideal body weight. Whereas patients with bulimia, by definition, are at normal weight or even above.
So they're just trying to self-regulate or stay at a certain, just not increase.
Well, there's something that's driving it.
But they stay at normal weight?
They can't, or even overweight. So they binge, meaning they eat a lot, and then they want to get rid of that either out of guilt or trauma or something. And that's what we have to find out, is why that is happening with them.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And it could be body image too with it, right? So bulimia is characterized by a cycle of dieting, binge eating, and compensatory purging. Okay? So they do all of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's the behavior to prevent weight gain, but purging behavior includes vomiting, diuretic, and laxative abuse. Even laxative we didn't mention, but so when underweight individuals with anorexia nervosa are engaged in binging and purging behavior, the diagnosis of anorexia nervosa supersedes that of bulimia when they reach that certain BMI. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So bulimia can turn into anorexia, but anorexia can't turn into bulimia, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anorexia is all about, so that's why I wanted to say, when you're taking your test for state boards and all that stuff too, remember that the BMI is the determiner, okay? So I had a video on thin, and maybe I'll put these in a sheet and just, so that Jeff can get all of these videos to you. This one's pretty good. Actually, I think I went out and tried to access this. It's a kind of a documentary, and it was out on Amazon, and you had to pay for it, but it was like $2 or something like that. So anyway, it's pretty good. So how to diagnose anorexia? So refusal to maintain body weight at or above a minimally normal weight for their age and their height. Okay. So intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, even when they're underweight. Okay. Disturbance in the way that which one's body weight or shape is experienced, either by looking in the mirror or hearing it from others, things like that. Okay. So here's the other part. They're going to have problems. So with women, they're going to have problems with their menstrual cycles during that. Why do you think that is? Okay, so I had a friend who was a bodybuilder, and she, so women need to have at least, I think it's 10 to 12% body fat. They shouldn't go below that, I think is what it is. She got down to like 6 or 5%, right? Which was half of where they needed to be, right? So she had almost zero fat on her, right? So what happens during that time, she says this is before she goes into each competition. So during that time, her menstrual cycles would stop for a period of time. And the reason is because they need, a certain percentage of body fat. So when they go below things in your, I don't know if it's a hormonal, could be a hormonal deal, but yeah, you need a certain percentage. Yeah, exactly. So that's what happens is your cycles get all screwed up or whatever, but mostly, they'll just kind of stop. And then the BMI as well. Okay. So there's two types of anorexia, right? There's the restricting type that we talked about.
Oh, excuse me.
Man, scared me. And then the purging type, okay? So this is what you need to specify. So when you're diagnosing it, it's either purging or restricting, okay? So then how we diagnose bulimia, okay? So it's how many reoccurrent episodes happen per week, right? So reoccurring compensatory behavior in order to prevent weight gain. So compensatory behavior. So the binge eating and inappropriate compensatory behaviors both occur, so on an average, at least twice a week for at least 3 months, right? So you're doing those compensatory behaviors at least twice a week and for a period of 3 months to be able to diagnose it, okay? And so all of those will be in the DSM saying it must meet these criteria, right? And so that's what this is the criteria for it. So self-evaluation is unduly influenced by body shape and weight, just like anorexia, and it does not occur exclusively during episodes of anorexia, okay? So it can happen on its own. So being, mild 1 to 3 episodes per week, that's where the 2 come from. Moderate, and this is when you're diagnosing, you'll put mild, moderate, severe, or extreme in. 4 to 7, severe is 8 to 13 times per week, and then extreme is 14 plus. So that's, more than 2 times a day, 2 plus times a day, every day for a week, okay? And that's very extreme.
Bob, how much time will they spend? Like, how much time, I guess, will that take up of their life? Like I think yesterday we got a neat kind of idea. For OCD, it generally takes about 6.8 hours is what we were told yesterday.
Yeah.
That just fascinates me, I guess, about how much time you can tell someone could get back on their life.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, how long that?
For this?
I guess it would depend whether it was mild, moderate, severe.
Yeah.
But I guess what would be the most, like, extreme amount of time? How much time do they generally spend? Has anybody ever told you, like, in a
You mean
session?
thinking about it and doing it?
No, just doing it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question.
I'm just curious, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would think, the extreme, it's on their mind.
Yeah.
Because that's every meal.
Yeah, wow.
Almost. That's going to go out and come, But so here's the issue with these. So bulimia, what makes it dangerous? What makes it dangerous is you eat this stuff, you get all this acid that's already starting to digest, and then you purge. All that acid is eating away your
Do they
throat.
struggle a lot with acid reflux?
Well, it's not that. It's just you're going to have it automatically when you purge, that acid is going to come up with it. And so it's burning your throat, and it's your tongue, your teeth. So it's just like thinking of somebody who's doing meth and stuff like that too, how their teeth are going to be rotting away. Same with bulimia, because if you're doing it a lot.
Wow. You blew my mind.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah. And so, but that's really dangerous because you're going to get holes and you can get cancer and things like that too. So that's why it's so important to get these taken care of. It's just not.
And they're not even thinking about that.
Mm-mm.
They're thinking they're producing all kinds of positive results for themselves,
Yeah.
not even thinking about the negative consequences of it physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's why we have to kind of really work with them in a quick way too as well.
Those details are huge. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are huge.
And same with anorexia, but besides getting below where you should be for normal body fat, look at what it's doing to the rest of your body, your organs, your kidneys and everything that's going on within your body is just not regulating in the correct way. So there's more to it than mental. It's the physical aspect of it too, where you're hurting yourself.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so assessing for eating disorders. So this is, general questioning when you're going to have a person in the room with you. You're going to be talking, okay, what's weight gain mean to you? Have you had weight gain in the past? What's your body image? Okay, and on the other extreme is weight loss. What's weight loss mean to you? How much do you feel needs to be lost? What are your eating habits right now? And that's going to tell a lot. Well, I don't eat breakfast, and I eat a cracker for lunch, and then I may eat, something for dinner or whatever, right? So a lot more goes into that there too of health, right? So if you're not eating, you're not fueling your body, and that could work on your mental stability and everything too as well. And so this is where it really kind of gets to the mindset of it is self-esteem, working on your self-esteem. And if I've got this body image, it is kind of going against my self-esteem, right? And then depression and anxiety can come with it as well. So you'll get that along with the other. So you're not only working on one thing, you're working on 2 or 3 other things too. So the other part is, where do I start? So which is driving which? Is the anxiety driving anorexia, bulimia, or vice versa? So what do I work on first, right? So that comes from the interviewing that we're going to talk about. Okay. And you guys talked about dissociative disorders yesterday, didn't you? I think he said. Okay.
What would be an example of one?
It's called DID, which is dissociative identity disorder.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so multiple personalities is what it used to be called.
Yes.
Split.
Yes, we did.
So just to kind of review that, well, you don't have to review it, but I had a video, maybe you guys watched it on there, that of the lady with 6 different personalities.
Oh, Mikose did. Yeah.
Yes, and so really what's going on with it is, the lady, there's been probably some sort of trauma in the person's life, and they are protecting themselves in some way. So they have these different personalities that are protecting them in some way, so they can become this personality to avoid something, right? Or a different personality to become something else or whatever. But it's usually some sort of protection. Yeah.
And is that curable?
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
without medication, but with requiring medication, I'm sure.
It's really, you have to take care of that trauma and help them through the trauma, because it's avoidance, right? So they're avoiding in some way, and self-protection.
So the personalities would be secondary, the trauma would be the primary concern when you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
So another primary concern of it is if they are having these different personalities within, right, that sometimes they don't even know. They'll have the amnesia during that time because these other personalities have taken over and stuff like that too. Yeah. So, but the mind is so powerful that it can do things like that too. So if we take care of the trauma, will it take care of the rest? And then you have to, work with them through that. I've never seen it. So, I think you would really have to be in a place where you're going to get a lot of extreme mental health type issues.
Like a hospital.
Yes, yeah. And you know what? And there's going to be a lot of people who do go that route, and we'll see a lot of extreme things. And then what you have to look for, is it caused by trauma? Is it caused by inducement of drugs and things like that too as well. Yeah. Okay, so we won't have to go into that. How about, so it's 9:30 right now. We can go into personality disorders. Okay. I think that's, because I think that'll leave us with enough time to do the other. Okay. Okay. So did you guys, I mean, have you guys read that book, the Diagnosing Made Easy?
Oh, yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yes, it is. It's got some good stuff in it too as well.
Just great examples,
Yes.
stories. That's where it's at.
So personality disorders are on page, I think they start around 646, is that right? In the DSM?
Yeah, 645, 646 would be probably
Okay.
where it gets into the actual specific disorders.
So there's 10 different kinds, right? Here's how I kind of want to start this off too, is personality disorders. It's funny because you'll say, well, that person's narcissistic or that person has borderline or whatever. It's funny because with counselors, it's almost a badge of honor to say, hey, I've got a borderline right now. You know, man, it's you have to be so careful with diagnosing with people. And I would never tell somebody right up front that I think you have borderline unless I've done tons of assessments and
Right.
just make sure. Because here's my thing is people will become their diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I have to really be careful. And, you know, with people with insurance and things like that too, to get their insurance, they have to be diagnosed with something, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's somewhat harmful too, unless they're prepared to, both of you are prepared to do the work, all right? So I see one of the personality disorders, borderline especially, or narcissist, being thrown around a lot by counselors and things like that too, when it could be something totally different. So I know you guys learned about bipolar yesterday. Did you guys talk about bipolar?
Yes.
Okay. So borderline and bipolar look a lot alike, you know? So there's extremes on moods. So, yeah. So there's getting the correct diagnosis is like the most important thing. Okay, so what is personality, right? So personality, your personality, is the way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that makes a person different from other people. So you can see, okay, so an individual's personality is influenced by experiences, your environment growing up, surroundings, your life situations, who you grew up with, who were your influences in your life, and then also genetics, right? So inherited characteristics that we have from our parents. It's funny, and I tell this joke all the time. My dad's 5'8", and I'm 6'6", and here was the joke. I said, Dad, I was in my 20s, and I was just joking with him. I said, this may be a little off color, but I say, you can tell me that you're not my real father. You know what I mean? Because he was that tall. And so we would have a laugh about it, of course, like that and everything. But I see so much of myself in him through my mannerisms, through my personality, through the way I think. Was part of it my environment growing up? Yes, because he taught me a lot and things. But it was also what he passed on genetically, too, as well. So it's the nature versus nurture, and I totally believe both of those, that we have both of those, right? So, so a personality disorder is a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that deviates from the expectations of the culture, right? And it causes distress or problems functioning, and it lasts over time. So it causes problems functioning. So I believe when you look through all of these disorders in the DSM, you're going to see what the characteristics of them are, or people are not going to come in for help unless it's they're having a problem in functioning in some form or fashion with their family, with their mental state, with their work, school, whatever. They won't feel they need anything, so that's when they come in for counseling, is when those functions are having a problem. And it lasts over time, okay? Personality disorders last over time. So there are 10 specific types of disorders, such as borderline personality disorder is one of them. So common to all of those personality disorders is a long-term pattern of behavior and inner experience that differs significantly from what is expected, okay? So you'll see prisons are full of antisocial people because what? They don't fit into the norm of what culture expects from them, right? Narcissists, they don't fit into the mold of what culture expects of them, right? Lack of empathy, things like that, okay? So the pattern of experience and behavior begins by late adolescence. So we see it again right here, that it's early in our development that we start seeing different patterns, right? And it causes distress or problems with functioning. So without treatment, the behavior and experience is inflexible. So that's another key word right there, is inflexible, and it's usually long lasting. So it's part of your personality, which is who you are, okay? So what's the difference between mental illness and personality disorders, right? I had a really good thing to read to you real quick. So let me just kind of read this to you, and I'll get you these handouts as well. But so distinguishing between mental health disorders is generally more difficult than distinguishing between medical conditions, because we can see a lot of medical conditions and stuff like that. Personalities we can't really see unless we see it in action, if that makes sense. So personality disorders are characterized by fundamental differences between the individual and most other people. These differences may be related to how the individual deals with or experiences their emotions. Experiences their emotions or other people's emotions as well. But they may also extend to differences in how they interact with the others, and what they think about problems and interpret those situations. So as we learn and grow up to interpret situations with others, so having personality disorders will mostly, we won't treat them like culture or environment has taught us to. Does that make sense? Okay. So there are 3 basic types of personality disorders, which are characterized in clusters, and we'll go through that. So type A personality disorders are related to the individual's ability to relate to other people and leading that person to behave in a way that other people regard as odd, okay? An example of this is paranoid personality disorder, where the individual is unusually distrustful and suspicious of others. Type B are mood regulation, kind of like borderline, histrionic, and things like that, and we'll get into those. And then the final type is C, where it's avoidant or anxiety-driven types of personality disorders, right? So at the same time, mood disorders are solely related to the individual's relationship with emotion. So not interactions with others or anything like that. It's the emotion that they're feeling. So that's kind of the difference, right? Is how we interact with culture or others is personality, and mood disorders is something biologically happening within us or chemically or whatever, but it's how we handle our moods and regulate. Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so if we look at this on a comparison chart of mental illness versus personality disorder, so mental illness is characterized by the extremity of the traits. And personality disorder is characterized by the moderate character of the traits, okay? So a mental illness can develop in a relatively short time. That's why I'm saying it could be a chemical thing that happens, whereas personality disorders are over the lifetime of the people. They'll start showing up early. And so let's look at, hate bringing this up, I'm going to, because it's probably the classic case is Donald Trump, okay? Classic narcissist, right? But if you've seen him over time, it just seems to have gotten worse, if that makes sense. Whether you're a fan or not, I mean, I don't want to go into that part, but it's just seeing the characteristics, right, of him. So, I believe as probably a young kid, it wasn't that extreme, but it just kept getting extreme over and over again. But and I think it's also a learned thing too. Mm-hmm. Learn from the environment. If I do this, this is what I get out of it, right? And then that makes it become more extreme, if that makes sense. Okay. And then mental illness. Mental illness and physical illness are comparable. It's stuff that you can see kind of happening. A personality disorder can't be compared to a physical illness because it's kind of who you are. Okay? So I say, remember the 10-6-3 rule. So this is when you go to take your test and everything, the 10-6-3 rule, when you're remembering personality disorders, there's 10 categories of them. So 10 different personality disorders. There's 6 criteria, and we'll go through that criteria in a moment. And then there's 3 clusters, A, B, and C. Okay? So the general diagnostic criteria, okay? So an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the individual's culture. So it goes against culture and is manifested in 2 or more of the following. So is it in the cognition, right? Is it in their thought? Or is it in affectivity, in the way that they feel or carry their emotions, okay? Is it in their interpersonal functioning, or is it in impulse control? Okay? So cognition is, ways of perceiving and interpreting their self, other people, and events that happen in their life. Affectivity is, the range of intensity, lability, and appropriateness of emotional response to outside stimulus. And let me give you an example. So under borderline, I have had a few people that I've counseled where there was borderline. And there's one classic person that I really had to get a good night's sleep, good nutrition and all that, because having them in the room when it was really exhausting to work through their emotions. if you will. It felt like a tennis game. You ever watch people watching tennis?
That's exhausting.
Yeah. So this person would come in as like, and even to me, but she was mostly talking about her husband and stuff. It's like, I love you, I hate you, all within a short period of time. So those emotions is I love you, and I need you, and all this stuff. I hate you, get away from me, type thing. So it was really, being able to play that tennis game with her with those emotions, but how we worked on things was really diving down into, and it was kind of trauma of the past, of what it really boiled down to. So. Okay. So the enduring, this is the criteria, right? So the first one is an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from culture. So those 4 things. And then next is the enduring pattern is inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of personal and social situations. So it's when they get into a certain situation, they will not deviate from how they treat every moment. Classic, the Donald Trump, when he would get into certain, he would handle every situation the same, right? You saw him in front of people he would talk about others in a way, but that was in every situation. He didn't care who he was talking to. He would do those things. Does that make sense?
Do you think that most people become collateral damage based on undealt with trauma from the past?
Yeah.
Like it's not even intended for that person, but they're just collateral damage as a result.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So people with trauma, they're just trying to protect themselves from something, and whatever is happening in that moment is how they're going to react. And you brought up a good point. So let's kind of look at it in a way. Here, the way the brain is constructed is there's prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking part. Then they call it the mammalian or reptile brain, where it's the part where your amygdala is and your hippocampus and all of these. So with the amygdala, it's about walnut size, about that size, and it's in the about middle of right around your brainstem at the top, and it's there for danger. So there's the fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. So anxiety causes your amygdala to fire. Okay, so trauma, if there's trauma in your life, it causes that anxiety, which causes the amygdala to fire, which causes you to do fight, flight, or freeze. The fight, flight, or freeze is something that overrides your prefrontal cortex, so you do things sometimes before you think it through, right?
Yeah.
So if you see a bear out in the woods and you go, oh, that's not good, you're out of there, right? But if you have to go, bear equals,
So okay, this is, I don't want to go down a rabbit trail here. Actually, that's kind of quite literal.
Okay.
in what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I, we watched this show called Alone. And basically it's just these people get put out in the wilderness and last man standing kind of wins money. And it's really fascinating though, the psychology. There's so much that goes into it.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of mental strength.
Yes.
A lot of mental strength. But last night we were watching the show. It's a new season 7, and there was 2 different occasions where one guy saw a bear, mm-hmm. and he said he was going towards it and trying to find it so that it didn't think he was scared. And another girl saw wolves, like 5 of them, and she went tracking them to try to find them. I thought that was one of the most odd things I've ever seen. I've never seen that ever in the show or anybody even talk like that. But it was like they were going towards the danger.
Yeah.
And that was really odd. But I didn't know if that applies to what we're talking about at all. But
okay, let me, I'll answer it in a different way. So you've heard of the Navy SEALs,
Yeah.
Okay, so they've got this training. So when they go and do this training, about 200 people, I think, are maybe around that, 160 to 200 people are admitted into the training, but only about 30 make it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and here's what they're doing is they're distinguishing between the people who can turn off their amygdala, and just use their prefrontal cortex. So here's some of the things that they're going to do. They'll throw you in a pool and put weights on you so you're at the bottom of the pool, and they'll give you the oxygen and all that stuff too, and then they'll have somebody come down and attack you and knock the oxygen out of your mouth, and you've got to be able to fight them and do all of these things without drowning. So what they're helping you do is overcome the fear of drowning, and getting the mind so that you're thinking clearly and not thinking about the danger. So another thing they'll do is you're going in, they'll put a hood over your head, and then they'll have good guys, bad guys in a room, and you got to shoot the bad guys. So they'll rip off this thing, and within a certain part, you'll shoot, but you got to distinguish between who's bad and who's danger, right? And so that's how. And of course, they do a lot of other mental fatiguing type things that will, kind of distinguish you between each other. But it's all about who can control their emotions and regulate their emotions the best that make it through. Right? Because if you have that panic comes in, your heart rate speeds up, all of these things happen within your body, and you're trying to survive. So survival mode comes on instead of clear thinking and getting rid of the danger that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, it does.
Yeah.
I did cage fighting for a little while. But right before I stepped into the cage, I was like, I'm going to die. What am I doing?
Yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah.
What have I done? But then all of a sudden, once the danger is right in front of me and the bell rings and it's time, go time,
Yeah.
all the training kicked in.
Yeah.
And you were going to win. It's survival time.
Absolutely.
And now it is like, okay, fight, the training kicked in,
Yeah.
and everything seemed to work itself out.
Yeah, but so here's what's going on in that part is your body, once that bell rang, once the bell rang, all these chemicals went through your body. So you had adrenaline, you have, what else? There's adrenaline and there's other things. But anyway, so that increases your amygdala, the fight part of it. Yeah, and you're just trying to survive and you're going to do everything. So you get more strength and all that. It's where you see people that adrenaline shoots and they're able to lift cars off people or whatever because,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's that fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. Yeah.
I hope that didn't go on a big rabbit.
No. It's all good.
Okay.
But this goes back to we are trying to avoid distress in some way, and this is kind of a learned response, and it's part of us now. This characteristic. So this is the way we act because we learn that we can avoid something by doing these things. So yeah. Good. It was good. That's a good question in there. Okay, so no questions on the phone yet. Okay, so the pattern is stable and of long duration and can be traced back to at least adolescence or early adulthood. There we go again. It's all, a lot of stuff happens in our youth, okay? Diagnostic criteria is, so here's the rule out clauses that they talked about. So this is in the DSM. The enduring pattern is not better accounted for as an expression of consequence for another mental disorder. So meaning, if we talked about borderline, we talked about bipolar, those two kind of look the same in some areas or aspects. So it wouldn't be borderline if it was bipolar. It wouldn't be both, if that makes sense, okay? And so the enduring pattern is not the direct effect of substance ingestion or a general medical condition. So here are the clusters that we talked about. So there's 3 different clusters. First one is paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. These people seem odd or eccentric, okay, and unusual behavior. So Jeff went through schizophrenia yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So schizoid and schizotypal are kind of branches of that, but they're part of the personality and not part of a mental disorder, okay? And we'll go through a little bit. Okay, so this is what each one of these looks like, right? Okay, so paranoid personality disorder is inappropriate, suspicious of other motives and behaviors. So let me go through this. So think of a movie where you may have seen these happen, so that you can kind of maybe get a picture of what this looks like. And I do have a video that I'll give to you guys where it has a lot of different movie scenes of each one of so you can see it happening, okay? So think about this: inappropriately suspicious of others' motives and behaviors. They think others are always trying to harm them physically, emotionally, or sabotage them, and they don't. Then they take extraordinary precautions against this, okay? They don't trust anyone. They're not psychotic, and they're not delusional, okay? So there's no hallucinations. They're not delusional in things. So that would be the difference between schizophrenia as well. Estimated prevalence in general population is 1 to 3% of these people. More common in people with relatives with schizophrenia. Okay. Can you name a movie of somebody that would be kind of like that?
Like
paranoid.
Beautiful Mind? No, he wasn't more paranoid, but
Yeah.
well, he was. I mean, he struggled with different things, but I think he had more mental.
Yeah.
Red. I don't know if you've ever seen Red with Bruce Willis, John Malkovich, and Morgan Freeman.
I did.
So John Malkovich's character was super paranoid.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And they talk about it. There was experiments done to him with like LSD and different things back in the past, but it's still his behaviors were super paranoid, and he had a bunker down, and he was constantly paranoid.
There you go. That's good. That's a good description. There was another one with Mel Gibson in it.
Oh yeah.
Where he was a taxi driver or something like that?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but
Conspiracy Theory.
Yes. So that's a perfect one.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's cluster A, paranoid, schizoid, schizotypal. Okay, so here's the schizoid part. Pervasive pattern of indifferent to other people. Indifferent to other people.
Side note.
Yes.
You should go back and watch that now after the chain of events that have happened, and listen to when he's driving people around in his taxi in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Almost beginning credits. You'll be a little...
To see it.
It'll...
Makes sense.
It's a little crazy actually as to like some of the things that have actually happened.
Awesome. Okay. I'll have to do that.
It's just like, whoa. I'm not saying everything, but just some of it's like, what did he know?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What were they? How, and some of it could have been the research he was to do the part. Who knows? But it's kind of interesting.
And you see people. You talk about Heath Ledger, right? Mm-hmm. Becoming. So he was the Joker,
yep.
And he became. And I watched him in a couple other movies, and man, you could just see him. I don't know. It was a little eerie and scary. I can't remember the other name of the next movie. Or it might have been before that, but because he killed himself during.
It was said to be a drug overdose.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I think he had some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so indifferent to other people, detachment from social relationships, a lack of interest in relationships, little emotional expression, loner, socially isolated. A lack of interest in sex. Can you think of any? That's kind of a tough one. So that's schizoid, right?
Okay.
Just think through. I mean, variations. So it's not schizophrenia. It's a personality type. Okay. So the last one is schizotypal. Okay? And so what it is peculiar, weird patterns of behavior, oddness in thought, perception, and social interactions, odd beliefs or magical thinking, speech may be difficult to follow, restricted affect and emotional expression, restricted emotional expression, often have very few friends beyond their own family, and then they are not psychotic or hallucinating, but people with schizotypal personality disorder have an elevated risk for schizophrenia, so it can turn into. So the difference between that schizophrenia and schizotypal is no delusions, no hallucinations, and it's over an enduring long period of time. So that, if you were taking a test for licensure, that would be what distinguishes it. Okay?
There's a movie called Split, I think.
Yes.
That is insanely impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did a good job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And just about the protecting part.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what I was
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, he did a good job in that movie. Okay, cluster B is dramatic, highly emotional, erratic, impulsive behavior. They may be colorful, and they may include antisocial behavior in each one. Okay, so histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, and borderline are the four that go in that, and we'll go through some of those too. So cluster C is characterized by anxiety and fearfulness, and avoidant, dependent, and excessive compulsive are the three in that. But it's characterized by the anxiety. So people, and that's part of their personality too. So obsessive compulsive, there's OCD and there's OCD that is a personality disorder. So the difference in those, and we'll kind of get into it, is OCD is you're doing something that you don't want to have that anxiety. So it's like clicking off the light 3 times or checking the knobs 2 or 3 times. That's to get rid of your anxiety. Whereas the obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorder, is they like the way they are, right? So there are people who like, this is my regiment, this is my schedule and all that, and they're really critical about all of those, but they like that. It's not to escape anxiety. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a lot of information, and I want to make sure we get through everything, and we want to take a break here in a little bit. So, personality disorders and treatment. How about if we just go through a little bit of that? So there's a lack of response to traditional therapies. So why do you think that is? Lack of response to traditional therapies. Frequently, and this goes along with it, frequently fail to comply with treatment regimens. Difficulty forming or trusting relationships. Can be unreasonable, demanding, or resistant and avoidant. And typically shut down or become highly escalated when experiencing strong emotions or affect. So to me, it's because it's a learned response, and it's also part of us, part of our personality. And so all of these things are over a long period of time. And within your brain, you have all these neurons. And to create habits, you have to do something how often? For 30 days,
Yeah.
If you do something, then it becomes a habit, they say.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is over a lifetime. So that's ingrained in you. So it's going to take special treatments and special regimens. So it's not going to be something that can happen overnight or you take a pill for. It's going to have to be I have to have awareness and change my behaviors and things like that too. This becomes kind of a lot tougher for people. And for me, it's a lifetime thing too. So that, the best treatment would be, yes, doing individual, but they should go to group counseling as well.
When people are trying to, like, say, obsessive compulsive disorder folks, they generally tend to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because they want to be able to keep their routine and not let anyone kind of get in the way of it, like because other people have a problem with it, or are they trying to keep people from having to be annoyed by it? Like, is it both self and other kind of driven to some extent in that regard?
Well, to me, so I've had some people with OCD, and one person comes to mind. He did a job for over 35 years. He was in charge of a lot of money, so if he made a mistake, it was going to be very, very expensive.
Gotcha.
For 35 years. So he double, triple, quadruple checked all the time. So then he retires. He goes home, and guess what he does? He's always constantly going through, did I make the right decision? Did I make the right? And he keeps going back. And so why this, and he didn't really see it as a problem until people pointed it out in his family.
Yeah.
Then it became a problem because then, guess what? He had anxiety. So this was...
Because people were pointing it out,
Yeah.
and he thought he was doing something wrong, and
Yeah.
it was kind of like...
Yeah, that something's wrong with me. People are just keep telling me that something's wrong with me. So we had to work on that too, but that became part of him and part of his personality and things like that too. But what he was trying to do was escape the anxiety over it. And so then he did become kind of a loner because people were always pointing out, you're doing this again, and blah, 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 and I'm a bad person and all that. So he would isolate himself because, and you'll see people with anxiousness and depression, they do isolate because they don't want to get put in those predicaments of anxiety is going to come up. So I'm not going to, especially social anxiety, they won't go to parties and stuff because I don't want to have to feel that. So I'm just going to stay home and isolate and all that. Or they'll just get groups of small and they can't get into big groups or whatever. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so antisocial personality disorder, okay? So this is one, you guys can really think about what that is. This disorder can range from extreme pathology as seen in criminal personalities to socially accepted actions that are seen as praiseworthy. Like, what do you think that means, right? So obviously, somebody in prison, antisocial, they don't care what's going on. But where it's praiseworthy,
Like elitist, some sort of elitist group or maybe something like that.
or a
Like above-
CEO maybe?
Yeah.
There's some CEOs of company, yeah. This may be, that have abused power, maybe Enron, things like that too. Where
The Aviator.
Yeah. So antisocial isn't just people in prison, Okay. So then clinical features: lack of conscience, chronic deceitfulness. I'm going to get at what I want at all costs, right? Risky behavior with their self and others. Nonconformity to societal standards. That's a huge one right there. It's not, nonconformist, right? So, I don't know if you've seen the movie, something, No Country for Old Men or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a guy in there with kind of a bowl haircut type thing.
I think he's the hitman, right?
Yes, perfect antisocial
Mhm.
personality. Remember, he has the coin and
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. Perfect antisocial picture, okay? So the clinical features continued. Behavioral features of these people: they have poor impulse control, criminal behavior, multiple relationships, promiscuous, because they don't care about other people. They just care about what they want to get, right, at any cost. Inner detachment from others. I'm not going to attach to you. I'm not, so that, because that would mean I'd have to care about you, right? So you'll, I like watching some YouTube stuff where they interrogate people who have committed crimes or murders or whatever. I like watching, because I do it to watch their body language.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a guy out there on YouTube that he talks about the people's body language in it, and you can see, when they're lying and all those things too. So it's really kind of cool.
Is there a certain, what is that name of those?
Yeah, I'll have to I'll find it for you.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, but there was one where they were showing Johnny Depp and I can't remember, Amber so Amber.
Oh, yeah.
Head, is that her name?
Amber Heard.
Heard. So it showed, him doing it, and he was like saying Johnny Depp's telling the truth and all this stuff because he's matter of fact and all this. But here's Amber over here, and they ask her a question, and she's looking all around, and she's what should have taken 5 seconds to answer. She's given a minute and a half or 2-minute answers because she's trying to paint a story and believe it herself and things like that too.
Interesting.
So it is, very interesting to watch but people with antisocial, they've got it, and they're, so it's kind of hard to distinguish because they, of their behavior, right?
Mm.
So the inner detachment from others, lack of empathy, manipulative, parasitic, no remorse, okay? They'll feign, socially appropriate behavior and honesty. So the disorder characteristics: illegal activities that violate social norms, outright deceit to achieve personal ends, impulse, they ignore the consequences, obviously, and irritable and aggressive, which that gets them into fights a lot. Okay. The style is their preeminence of self-values over others. So they don't care about the other person. They just care about what they want to get. White lies, deception. They spin information. And this is with most of these on that side: narcissism, histrionic, all those. Self-indulgent, assertive with personal presence. Okay, so the next one. So they disregard safety, irresponsible with their finances. So this will be another thing if you're working with somebody, their finances, no conscience and exploit others, and so on. Likes to be free of constraint, don't like people constraining them, okay? May be a defect in their ability to understand and express emotional experience, lack of conscience and empathy, decreased anxiety response to fearful situations.
So people could definitely say even too that they would even think somebody that had an antisocial personality would be a narcissist.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of these in there.
Yeah.
So you have to see what the degree of one. So that's the other part is when you get into counseling, we have to really look at assessments. Assessments are so important.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, when I have counselors and go, oh, I've got a borderline personality or I've got all these things. I'm like, how did you come up with that? Well, it just looks like. No, that's not good enough, right?
Yeah.
So we have to really...
Yeah.
Because what if you started somebody comes into a doctor and they have one thing, but he's treating them for
They're never going to get better.
cancer or
They'll
something.
never heal.
Yeah.
They'll get better.
Yeah. So, it looks like you have cancer. There's this, blah, blah, blah. So then they do chemo, they do radio.
Could actually have worse effects.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Really?
going to hurt the rest of your, So, there's just so much that could go on. Okay, narcissism. The term narcissistic refers to people whose personalities are organized around maintaining their self-esteem, their own self-esteem, whereas the antisocial, it's all about them, but I don't know. I think they have self-esteem, but they don't worry about anybody else's stuff. As narcissists, they worry about what they can get out of people by manipulating. Okay. Healthy individuals all have vulnerabilities in our sense of self, and we try to operate our lives so that we can feel good about ourselves.
So they need other people, narcissists. They
Yes,
want to
good
carry
point.
out-
Yeah,
in order
that's
to
yeah,
carry
that's a
out
great
their-
point. Yeah. So they need to manipulate others. Where antisocial, they don't. They just will plow through whatever's in their way.
Or as obstacles.
You're right. Yes, exactly.
These are objects.
There you go.
Almost like a different, like an object would be used for something, an obstacle would be something you hurdle over or get away.
Yeah. And so objectifying too.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to use you for what I can
Correct.
get, and then leave you. Healthy pride is enhanced by approval and injured by disapproval. So that's going to be a big thing. So antisocial, they don't care what you think about them.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissists do. And they're going to do whatever it takes to change that disapproval. That's where gaslighting comes in, okay?
Mhm.
They gaslight you so that you believe that you're the problem and it's not them.
Mm.
Okay, so that's a huge thing. So when people are talking to you about that, that's a huge thing. Here's the other part is, so these personality disorders, there's a spectrum, okay? So so what if you had narcissism as part of your personality, but it was only 5% of what your personality is, whereas Donald Trump or something, it's 90% of his, okay? So there's that spectrum of difference, right? So can a person who looks overly confident and all that have narcissistic tendencies? Yes, but it doesn't become a problem until it affects your life, your marriage, your work, your school, things like that. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
I just kind of want to put that out there because I think we all have some sort of personality disorders, if you will, but it doesn't become a disorder until those things happen. Does that make sense?
Or needs that are just trying to get met because
Yeah.
the majority of society really sucks at giving it to you.
Yeah.
Like affirming. People suck at that.
Yeah.
Just be
Well,
honest.
and it's getting worse.
Yeah, it's
Instead
getting
of
way
better
worse.
with
So you have
technology.
to try to get it for yourself because we all need it.
Yeah.
To know that we're on the right path, to know that we're loved. So some people are
Absolutely.
just good about,
Yeah. So there's healthy
yeah.
and not healthy, right, ways
Yeah.
of doing things. So narcissism would be an unhealthy way.
And I was just using very non-clinical terminology.
Yeah, no, that's
Suckage.
good. No, that was perfect. It was good. Okay, the dysfunction in narcissism comes in being excessively preoccupied with seeking approval. Preoccupied with it. I'm always seeking approval and all that. But once they get it, oop, I got it from you, I'm on to the next thing. Okay? So the term narcissism comes from the Greek myth about Narcissus, a handsome Greek youth who, according to Ovid, rejected the desperate advances of a nymph named Echo. I just threw this in here because I thought this was pretty interesting of where it came from. So this caused Narcissus to fall in love with his own reflection in a
Yeah,
pool of water.
that's
That is powerful. So he watched his own reflection in there because he loved himself, right? Here's this person, and I'm getting what I need out of just doing this, and that was the picture of it right there. Okay. So diagnostic considerations of these. So clinical features of narcissistic styles: they exaggerate their talents and their capacity and their achievements. So here a lot of me, I, right, in how they describe. And the other part is, even if they're part of a team, it's me, I, okay? They won't give anybody else the credit as part of their team, okay? They don't recognize limitations, and they have a grandiose fantasies, and they see themselves as superior, so that they're superior, more superior than in anyone else. Okay? So they're always going to put themselves above you, and that's where gaslighting can come in. Strong need for admiration and attention. Okay? Alternately idolizes and devalues others. That's exploitive. So what's that look like, right? So if they're idolizing and devaluing, so they want to put you in your place, right? So you're the greatest, blah, 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 and then all of a sudden, guess what? You're the worst person, right? So they're going to, once you start getting any type of self-esteem, they're going to pounce on you and put you down to make you feel like, so they're superior.
So if their brain can only connect the fact that if you were to let somebody boost their self-esteem even more, they could give you more affirmation and admiration. If they could only connect those two ideas, you build somebody up and they have more than energy to give you what you need, but they can't make that connection.
But what that is genuine, being genuine.
Correct.
And authentic.
Right.
So with them, their building of their idolizing and all that is not
Because that would take
genuine.
away from themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'm going to build you up, and so I can get you to where I need you to do these things, and then I'm going to tell you how bad you are at it. But I've got what I need out of it.
Limited time only.
Yeah. But to get what I need.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good. Hypersensitive to criticism, of course. Feel entitled. Intense feelings of anger in response to criticism and defeat. Intense anger in response, okay, to criticism. They get bored easily. Feelings of meaninglessness, futility, emptiness. They may seek deep emotional connections. Values and interest change and are corruptible. Their values change, right? So their values they change their values to go along with what their needs are at that moment, right? Disregard for conventional rules. So that's kind of where, it's the same as the antisocial. And then they will occasionally break the law too. So how about looking at, if you think of a movie, one of my favorite movies of all time is Wall Street. So remember, Gecko the Great, right? So this explains him perfectly. Narcissistic to the hilt, and he will even break laws. But see how he would gaslight. What was the guy's name? Bud Fox. So see how he would get Bud Fox to do whatever he needed to. He would gaslight him and make him break laws and all that stuff too, because he knew he would build him up, say, you're going to be this, blah, blah, blah. And then just the second later, he's like going, you're terrible. You're no good. I need you to be better, blah, blah, blah. And just keep, dangling that stuff in front of him. So that was a perfect example, is Wall Street. If you haven't seen it, I love that movie. Okay, sexual behavior that is promiscuous or disinhibited. Type of narcissistic persons, the grandiose elitist type. Okay, classic description of narcissistic style: arrogant, conceited, domineering attitudes. That's remember Pauly D.
I've heard of him.
Okay, so I can't. And I never watch these things, but you see him every once in a while in some things.
I heard.
He's perfect narcissist too. Both of those guys. Anyway, I found that out there. So then another kind is vulnerable, fragile, subtle, compensatory type, less obviously entitled. Narcissistic needs and expressions are hidden behind acceptable and even desirable social facade, meaning that they want people to view them in a certain way. So somebody going out and buying a nice car, nice clothes, all this stuff, but they have $0. But they want people to think that they have tons of money and all that stuff too. That's kind of an example.
Okay.
importance of self. They're selfish, they self-love, self-involved, self-centered. Look at a lot of self there, right? Preoccupied with self, a lot of self, right? Me, me, me. The concept referring to the core of the personality, it's present at birth, and they have the potential for it. Okay, so it comes out as a learned response. Viewed as an independent center of initiative and capable of partitioning or splitting. So to build you up, tear you down, they can partition, they can split that. So they have a true self and a false self. A true self, false self is the core structure of the narcissistic style. So anyway, their true self is fragile, vulnerable, all of those things. So they're going to do everything that they can to protect that. Their false self is this person that's got everything together and powerful and all those things. And they're going to do everything that they can to not get into the true self. And so lie, cheat, steal, all of those things. A lot of anxiety, a lot of other things that can happen, depression, things like that, happen on this side of it. So that's why they want to stay on the other side. Okay. Narcissistic splitting. So true self, this is a good picture of it. They have that internal conflict of shame, fear, self-contempt, denial, confusion. They feel empty inside, rejected, they feel used, right? That's their true self. So they'll do everything that they can not to have that. So their false self is they have to be a perfectionist, grandiose, and they'll tell everybody these are the big things, in my life, right? To make them bigger than what they are. They have pride. They're self-involved, manipulative, high achievement, right, in their lives, and they're going to feel entitled. Okay. So their relationships looks like this. People are used to sustaining a particularly unrealistic and grandiose perception of the self. Their relationships are prone to exploitation, just kind of what we talked about, diminishing others, and they may rage against others when experiencing this fragmentation. If they feel themselves, anything of their true selves coming up, they may rage against that. And that's where the gaslighting will come into, saying, you're the problem, not me, where they will be the victim. Okay? Okay, so then we get to the borderline personality types. They have recurrent relational difficulties, incapacity for emotional intimacy, means that they can't bond with others very well. There's a lot of trauma in the past with borderline, okay? Unstable work environments, because they can't. Why do you think they have, why do you think you have all of these as you're reading this? I mean, unstable work environments, problems with depression and anxiety, substance abuse and other addictive behaviors, risky behaviors including self-mutilation, sexual risk, and all that stuff too.
I mean, a lot of those would be outside of the norms, the expectations, I guess, that
Yeah.
society, or just expectations of people.
Yes.
They're not struggling with those things.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they really want.
Right.
In their environment, or people are generally not searching for that.
Yeah. One thing that I'm looking at in here with them is they're not good at regulating emotions for one reason or another. So if they did have some trauma in the past, they don't want to feel. So they're going to protect themselves in one way. So they need people in their lives, but they don't want to disappoint. They don't want to let them down and all that stuff too. So they'll draw them in, but they also want to keep them at arm's length. This is borderline, right? I want to keep you at arm's length too, so that you won't see the troubled person or the person that is broken or fragile or whatever, because you can use that. You know, so they may have had a narcissistic parent or two, and they're protecting themselves against that too, right? I want, you know, I'll do anything and be perfect and all this stuff because I just want you to love me, you know, but I can never be perfect enough, so I don't want you to see that. So it's that yin and yang of pulling in, okay? Looks a lot like bipolar depression, because when they're on and they're wanting to connect with others, they can look not so much manic, but, you know, above. But they can also, when they're pushing people away, you know, and isolating, it can look a lot like depression in that time. Relational instability is marked by excessive splitting. They're either one way or the other, excessively, right? Which is a tendency to see self and others in an all good or an all bad category. They're either all good or all bad, or the people around them are all good or all bad. And that's why I'm saying in my sessions with that one in particular, it was up and down 30 times within that hour, you know, so it was there was a lot of splitting there. Often these perceptions are unstable and oscillate back and forth. And so the next is projective identification, where failing to see troubling aspects of one's own personality, but clearly seeing the same aspects in others. So it's like in the Bible, right? The splinter in the plank in the eye, right? So this is, all I'm looking at is your problems, but I can't see the problems in my own self. Right, and they fail to, because they don't want to. They're trying to, protect themselves, and they protect themselves from themselves too. Okay, so I'll just see if I can't make these available to you guys. Okay, so the last one in this category, histrionic personality disorder. I think it's the last one. So this person, her name's Katie Morton, I believe, and she has some really good videos out on YouTube. So if you look for her, she'll do almost the whole DSM, and kind of, I think it's Katie Morton is her name. Morton? And so what she does is she'll have these videos out there that kind of go through, okay, this disorder, here's what to look for, just kind of like what we're doing now. And but she'll have all of them out there too. So if you ever need to, look at, some and learn about it, she's got some really, really good videos. Okay. So here's what histrionic personality looks like. So they're very sexual, they're dramatic, they're seductive with their presentation, right? And they want to attract and become the center of attention more than anybody in the room, right? So they want to be the center of attention and take that away from others. Whereas narcissistic would want to exert control over the other person. So these people want to do everything they can to become the center of attention, but narcissism would want to control those people, okay? The histrionic individual may use a lot of emotion when communicating, but a high degree of shallowness and no depth in the relationship with that other person, okay? And they're highly manipulative, but they don't control. So they're highly manipulative in the moment. And that's why they use a lot of sexuality and stuff like that too, because they can manipulate in that way. But they don't do it to control.
So they want a result, not the person. They want the result.
Yeah, well, and they don't care to get other people to do to control, but they want people to view them as the best person in the room or whatever,
Yeah.
or the most beautiful or whatever it is.
Which
Yeah.
would be the desired result they're looking to get.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're not necessarily care who gives it to them. It's not about control.
Yes.
The person
Yes.
who gives it to them, just
Yes.
manipulating them for the desired outcome.
Yeah, their manipulation is in who they are and what they look like and all those things. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So the diagnostic career criteria, so 5 or more of the following necessary to diagnose it, right? So they're uncomfortable in situations in which he or she is not the center of attention. So they would become in some way by maybe fainting or doing something, you know, so they're going to do something
Yeah.
to get the attention onto themselves. Interactions with others is often characterized by inappropriate sexually seductive means or provocative behaviors. They display rapidly shifting and shallow expressions of emotions. Very shallow people, right? They consistently use physical appearance to draw attention to themselves. And they have a style of speech that is excessively impressionistic and lacking in detail. So you'll be talking to them, and they won't talk about too many things of importance, of no substance. But it's not. It's just look at me. It's not hearing what I say. So it shows self-dramatization. So there'll be a lot of drama in their life. So whenever they're telling stories, it's going to be full of a lot of drama. I think of, and I say these shows, not that I watch them or anything, you know, they're just out there, but Wives of the NBA or Housewives of whatever. I can't remember what those shows are called, but you could see a lot of that going on, how they're dressed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of drama going on in their life, and one tries to over-dramatize the other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, trying to one-up on the drama in their life. They're suggestible, so considers relationship to be more intimate than they actually are. Like we're best friends, we're besties, and all that stuff too. But there's no substance to their relationships. Okay, so when would a personality disorder be helpful to a person in their professional or personal lives? So would and these are just kind of questions. Would an antisocial personality disorder be helpful for a boxer or a football player? We kind of talked about that a little bit. What do you think? At least some form of it?
I mean, yes, in some regards. I mean, they wouldn't be overly involved. They would get in, give the facts,
Right.
get out. This is what you need to do, okay? But I'm not going to be, I guess, try to do it for you.
And they're
or
not
be
good team
over-
members.
Huh?
And they're not good team members either.
Yeah. Well, and boxer, I mean, is generally individuals.
Yes, that's a great
I
point.
guess football player
Yeah.
is more of a team sport, so
Mhm.
it wouldn't be necessarily good for football.
Yeah.
Unless you were just training the person individually, but you're still training him with a team
Yeah.
in mind. A boxer is individual, so that would work
Yeah.
well.
So I think of, people that I've seen in sports, Mike Tyson maybe, Ray Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Rodman might be part of that because I don't think he was ever really a team player. He was all about himself. That could be a lot of narcissistic, but anyway.
Yeah.
Narcissistic personality would be helpful for Miss America, right? So just a lot of,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, questions like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, that shows maybe an area where people would be drawn to just so that they could hide out. Or,
Yes.
Or kind of give in to it, go unnoticed,
Yeah. So we kind of went through,
like a night auditor for like
Yeah.
somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder,
yeah. Well, like that guy that I was talking about.
counting the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and if he was off a little bit, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, so you have to be on. Okay, so what we'll do, it's 10:34. I know.
Time go.
I know. So let's take a break now. And how about, how long did you guys usually take? 15 minutes?
15.
Okay.
The longest.
So let's 10 till 11. No. Yeah, 10 till 11 will be fine. And then we'll restart.
Do you turn off the?
Okay, let's see if I'm operating this the way I'm supposed to. Come on. Yes, doing it right. I love it when it comes together right.
25 seconds late. Delayed.
All right, good to have you all back. So this portion is going to be all about the mental health interview, right? So I work in a Abundant Life Counseling Center. Here's the thing with Abundant Life Counseling Center is we work with families, children, marriages. We do some anxiety and depression. I think, OCD, everything that's going to be in the DSM mostly we would work with, but we're not a mental health facility, okay? So I really tell people, especially, people who are calling in, if it's something that's above, I say our pay grade or whatever, we have a lot of partners that we're going to refer to. So if you guys do get into counseling as your ministry, I say, get a lot of partners that you're going to be able to refer out to if it's like private practice and things like that too. We have a lot of interns at almost 20 interns at our facility right now. And so these are people that are just still in school, learning, and sometimes they're given people that have mental health issues, and I'm like, it's okay for us to refer you. I don't want you being, the person that it takes the burden on for them. And we were just talking during break and about, I do a lot of supervision with the students, and when I do the supervision with them, I really check in on them. And I had one in particular, she came up to me and said, hey, I can't sleep at night. This is all I think about are these people. And I said, hey, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be with them in the moment, ministering to them and connecting with them and making them feel safe, secure while you're in session with them. But I said even more importantly is you are the window to Christ. So you're not to care, to take their burdens on your shoulder. You're the window to Christ, and Christ will take their burdens and love them through that and all that. You're the conduit. And so when we kind of said that, it kind of helped them out. And another thing is, I said when you leave your office and you hit the door jamb, that's when you leave everything in that room. Because if you're not good for your family, yourself, and you're carrying those burdens at home with you, it's not fair to your family or yourself. So anyway, that's the part of the supervision that I kind of talk about. So the mental health interview is one of the most important things. So all the way from the phone call, when you get phone calls, like when I was doing my private practice, I would have advertisements out on Psychology Today and Facebook and all these, where I would get people phone calls from people. So one of the first things you do is you interview them on the phone of kind of what's bringing them in. And so then that's kind of where you see, hey, is this a good fit for me or is it not a good fit? Because ethically, if it's something that I don't know how to work on, I need to get them to somebody else and I can't just leave them, right? So I want to make sure, over the phone that, hey, we're doing this phone interview and that we're both a good fit for each other. Okay? So, I kind of wanted to throw this in there too. You all have DSMs. I've got my DSM here. There's this thing called diagnostic tabs, and it's at diagnostictabs.com. And I don't get any money for this or whatever. But what it is you put these little tabs in your book, and it separates all of the disorders and diagnoses and diagnoses And so anyway, these tabs, so that when you look at, you can say, hey, I want to go to personality disorders. Well, the tab is right here. So you can, and then you can go right straight to the personality disorder. So if I want to go to avoidant or dependent personality disorder, I can go right to it.
Where do you get, where is that?
It's at diagnosticstabs.com. Yeah. So that's a cool little deal, so that you can just go right straight, or here's OCD, or here's delusional, or here's...
Can I come over and just look at that?
Yeah,
I just wanted
absolutely.
to see what the little tabs.
Yeah.
Oh, it gives them specific.
Yeah. So as you can see, it kind of says, if there's... Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So highly recommend getting that. It's like, I don't know, they're the only game in town. It may cost $25 or something like that, because, and it's probably only about $2 worth of material, but if they're the only game in town, they're gonna try to make a profit off of you. So okay, and then the diagnosis made it easier. I'm glad you guys have this, because it's got some really good information in it. Actually, I'm going to go to one of the stories here in a second in it, but yeah, we'll get started there. So there could be a lot of arguments against diagnosing mental illness. What are your thoughts about what would be arguments against diagnosing mental illnesses? I kind of put a few down here.
Just the fact
Ones that I was thinking of.
Labels people for life, and then
Yes.
like you said earlier, they feel like they then have to become that,
Yes.
and that's now part of who they are. So they
Yeah.
have to assimilate.
Yeah. Assimilate too. That's perfect. Yeah. So diagnosis can lead to self-fulfilling prophecy and despair. Diagnosis can lead to professionals to ignore significant data that does not support the diagnosis. Right. So that's why I say it's so important, if we're going to diagnose somebody with something, that we have to be correct and right on, and we can't just say pick one out of the DSM and then they become that to us, because then we're ignoring other things that it can be. Yeah. The diagnostic system tends to ignore culture, age, and gender. So when we talk about schizophrenia. Is only it starts in a younger person. Well, what if they have signs and symptoms later on at 50 years old? Well, it's probably not schizophrenia then. It's probably something else, right? So many people who use the DSM are not qualified to use it. To me, that's the biggest thing. If I'm doing supervision with people and they come in, they say, hey, I have a borderline, or I have a bipolar, or I have something. Tell me how you arrived at that, right? So, and I like it because I want them to be able to go through and say, hey, here are the steps if they tell me that they did assessments and they did all this, I'm like going, good for you, that's awesome. So let's just make sure that everything's right. But if they're just pulling something out because it sounded close, I really question it a lot. Okay. You can often get two different diagnoses from different clinicians. That's another thing. So you can go to see one person and get one diagnosis, and then and get a totally different one from another one. Okay. So what are arguments for? Right? Arguments for diagnosing somebody. So if the mental illness exists, for professionals to ignore them regardless of the client's perception would be irresponsible. If we ignore it, right? Diagnosis does not minimize self-healing and may facilitate it if it is associated with good data. If we're diagnosing it correctly and we've got a treatment plan, that's going to help them. Yeah. This is my favorite one. Diagnosis can change, can lead to hope and change in their lives if we have the correct ones. Here's another one I like. It aids in research where some forms of mental health are growing. So new mental health type of disorders come out all the time. So there's more and more research going to it. The good thing is I think we're getting really good at controlling the stigma. Stigmas are kind of going away, and you're seeing more and more people talk about mental health and going and seeing counselors and stuff. Counseling is one of the biggest growing professions right now because we don't have enough counselors to go along with all the mental health needs right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So why do we diagnose? Diagnosing means distinguishing or discerning from. So we diagnose so that it will provide that hope and change.
Mm-hmm.
And we diagnose so that others will get better. And we diagnose because, do the assessments and all that because we want to, it's not only helping them, but it's helping other people who may have the exact same thing. So it's aiding in research and all that. What's prognosis? Do you guys know what prognosis means? So prognosis is the likely pathway of what that ailment is. So like you'll hear somebody was diagnosed with cancer or something like that. Well, the prognosis of this, my father had pancreatic cancer, okay? Prognosis of pancreatic cancer is very, very low, right? That you're going to survive it, right? So that helps in the treatment. So if we know what our prognosis is through the lifetime of this, it helps us with the treatment of the here and now. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Difference between assessment and diagnosis. Do you guys know what that is?
I think the assessment would come prior to the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Really, it's more in like the interview process, assessing, and then probably collecting all that data to make a proper diagnosis.
Absolutely. So assessing would be like looking at all the signs and symptoms and gathering data and researching and doing all those things before we put a formal diagnosis on it.
Which
right?
is why you have to take so much time, so you
Yes.
make the proper, or just say misdiagnosed or undiagnosed.
Yeah, exactly.
To be safe until you've had more time.
Very good. Yep, very good. So the next couple things are signs and symptoms, right? So signs are objective. And symptoms are subjective. So signs are what we feel and what we see within ourselves, and symptoms are what others see in us. Does that make sense? Okay. So a syndrome is a list of conditions that count for that. List of symptoms that count for that diagnosis, right? It's symptoms, signs, and events that occur. So those is what the syndrome is. And then the differential diagnosis. So when we diagnose something, we also want to put differentials with it. The differential is could be something that it may also be.
The comorbidity.
Yes, yeah, that word. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're always gonna, kind of put a differential diagnosis in if we're not 100% sure of what it is. Okay, good. I put this in here, that, thoughts and assessments of diagnosis. I just wanted to show, there's a, part where there's, where it says premature death and then high level of wellness. There's stuff in between that. And what we're always working towards, we may have the disability and then the signs and the symptoms. That's where, we come in. But we want to help the person have awareness of, and then we want to educate them, and then we also want to have them experience growth in those areas, and that moves towards wellness. Does that make sense there?
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's a disability, signs and symptoms, they're not working towards the side of wellness unless they're educated and unless they have awareness of and all of those. So specifiers are extensions to a diagnosis that further clarify the course, severity, and special features, right? So you can have like generalized anxiety disorder, and a specifier may be that only in social conditions or something like that. So I'm only going to have this anxiety when I'm in large groups or something like that. So that's a specifier, right? Remember to consider family history in your assessments. So we'll go through a lot of that. Choose the simplest disorder first. So Jeff probably talked about zebras and horses, right? Okay. Okay. And then there's the 4Ds. I won't go into this a lot, but so.
We went over this yesterday, yeah.
Okay, the 4Ds. Okay, perfect. Gotcha. Okay, so the importance of getting the diagnosis correct. You guys have the Diagnosis Made Easier book? Okay, so page 15. Just a little story of why it's so important, right, was Alvin here. So let me kind of read this. For several months, 58-year-old Alvin, a certified public accountant, had been having problems with his memory. At first, he couldn't recall that the latest changes in tax law. Later, he forgot appointments and blanked on the names of his clients. Eventually, he had to take leave from his job with a national tax preparation firm. Within a few months, the ages of his children had escaped him, and eventually he couldn't even remember their names. So now he could no longer care for himself, and his wife had to employ a practical nurse several hours a day just to cope, help him cope and to bathe him and feed him and all that stuff. So Alvin's doctor had diagnosed him with Alzheimer's, okay, and was on the verge of recommending a nursing home placement when Alvin was hospitalized for pneumonia. There, a consulting neurologist put together several important observations: his relatively young age, a negative family history for Alzheimer's, and his shuffling gait when he walked, and the unmistakable odor of urine that clung to his clothing. The problem with walking, the loss of bladder control, were the classic symptoms of normal pressure hydrocephalus, a potentially correctable condition. When imaging studies confirmed the diagnosis, a shunting procedure was done, and he got better. Okay? So that's why I'm saying, so how important a diagnosis is. So they were ready to put him in a home, and when it was something else, and it changed his whole life, right? So if they wouldn't have gotten to this, it could have damaged his body. But
would it be, speaking of that, would it be, I mean, I guess kind of depending on like the signs, symptoms, and so forth, would it be advantageous to advise a visit to the doctor to
yes,
the majority of patients? Like,
absolutely.
While you're doing an assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm always, if somebody comes in and they have anxiety, depression, something that medication could assist with, I have them go to their general practitioner or a psychiatrist or something, just to rule out medical conditions. So great question.
And then have them come back and then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Well, and the whole deal is counselors can't medicate, for one. So, and I want to make sure that the professionals who are good with medication are the ones dealing with that too as well. Yeah, good question. Appreciate that. Okay, so the roadmap to diagnosis, if you turn to page 5 in this book too as well, it's got a great roadmap. So level 1 is to gather and complete your database of information. So including the history of the current illness, your previous mental health history, personal and social backgrounds, your family history, your medical history, and your mental status exam. Right, so that's your level 1, is to just completely gather as much information as possible before you even look at diagnosis, right? You want to identify syndromes. Syndromes are collections of symptoms that go together to produce an identifiable illness. Major depression is a syndrome, but so is alcoholism. And so level 3, so you're identified all the syndromes that it could be. So here are maybe like all your things that lead up to the differential diagnosis, right? So construct a differential diagnosis, which is just a term for all the disorders that you think the patients could have, okay? And then level 4 is the decision tree, where you select the most likely provisional diagnosis for further evaluation and treatment. That's the zebras and the horses, right? So don't pick a zebra when it could obviously be a horse. So let's work through the easiest to the most complex. Level 5 is identify other diagnosis that it could be. So that's where the comorbidity can come in, and could be potentially 2 to 3 different diagnoses all at one time. Then you write your formulation as you check on your evaluation, and then you reevaluate your diagnosis as new data comes on, because you may diagnose and then you may counsel for a while and you notice, hey, something has changed. So, and maybe within that syndrome, right, things could have changed, and which would make it a different specifier or something like that too. So you've worked through trauma, and it's not PTSD. It's moved to depression now or whatever, because we've worked through the trauma, and so now we're working through the depression and so on. Okay, so here are some helpful tables in the decision trees for the section. There's table 81, 82, 91, 92. So here are all the pages for it: 89, 93, 102. 113. So those are all good to look through when deciding, which way to go. Do you need to look at this for a second?
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm just going to put it all in one place. I'm good, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So the mental health interview is a comprehensive mental interview that is the cornerstone of obtaining an accurate diagnosis and providing a specific treatment. So there's all of these things that we go through to get to a treatment plan, and then we follow the treatment plan, and each session goes along with the goals that we have for that session or that week or however long the time period is. It's designed to collect sufficient information to make that diagnosis and to develop a treatment plan. And then the initial interview is required by virtually all third-party payers, right? So they, if you're going to work with insurance companies, they require, because they want you to make the proper diagnosis too, right? They don't want to get sued. They don't want you getting sued and all that, okay? So there's 3 skills that go into this interview that you're going to do, or these interviews, right? So the first one is the interviewing skills. So during this interview, even the time from the phone call, is we are building that relationship and what goes into that relationship, right? So what we're doing is building trust, and we're building that safety, security, so that when we're sitting in the room with them, they feel safe and secure to tell us anything that's going to help us with their needs. So diagnostic skills, We want to be very good at the knowledge of the diagnosis and the psychopathology, and knowing our DSM. But here's even more. It's knowing our population. If I go out on Facebook and I go to this one, it's a bunch of therapists that are out there, and they go, "Hey, I'm needing a therapist that knows this." Well, you got a few of them that are going out there and they say, "I'm an expert in that," and they're an expert in everything. So I'm like, how can you be an expert in everything? So but they're just wanting business, and I get it. But that could do more harm than help if we say we're an expert and we're not an expert in something. So I really look at that as an important thing. And then documentation skills. This is so important for many reasons, that we document well so that if our notes do land in the hands of a medical doctor or something, so that they understand how we arrived at our diagnosis. And secondly, there's legal parts of that too. So we want to be very good at that knowledge and those skills, because and for me, I write all of my session notes like I'm writing it to a doctor, the client too, so that they're going to read it, and also a judge. Okay, so those are the three people that I think about when I'm writing my notes. So before the interview, here's the distribution of time that you would spend on it. Right? What's 15% on their chief complaint that they have, 30% on the pursuit of a specific diagnosis. So 15% on medical history and their family history, 25% on their personal and social history, evaluation of the character pathology, and then 10% on the MSE, which is the medical status exam, and then 5% on the discussion and the diagnosis of the treatment. Because then you've really, and then planning the next meeting. We were talking about movies earlier. Okay. So those were the sources. Here are the sources of where we collect our information, right? The clinical interview, what we observe, what others observe, what maybe the doctors observe, maybe even other family members. What are previous records that will help you, that they may be able to provide maybe from their doctors or other family members. Doing testing and assessments, very important here. Doing testing, and then the assessments. There's plenty of assessments out there, like for depression, there's the Beck assessment. So there's usually an assessment for everything. Biographical information, and then collateral informants, and that means family members. Mm-hmm. That can say, hey, this is what I'm seeing when this happens. So that guy that had the OCD, his wife said, this is what I'm seeing. And, when this happens to him. And then I'm able to say, because people can come in and say, hey, this is happening, but it may not be the exact thing. But if I'm seeing other people that have seen that too, that would probably help with more mental health type of issues like schizophrenia and things like that too, that people may be having but not being able to talk about it, but others are seeing it. Okay. Here's the quadrants. I'm not gonna go through these. It's really just basically going through what we just kind of said. Rapport building in the interview, right? So what brings you in today? How did you hear about our clinic? Tell me about yourself. So rapport building is when we're building up our relationship with them. And within that, we're creating that safety, security, but we're also watching body language. Me, I'm always watching body language from the person. You can get so much from them. So next, you can ask non-structured questions. So are you experiencing anxiety? Are you worrying? Is there nervousness? What other types of things are you, when you're experiencing anxiety, are you also experiencing depression? So 50% of the time when anxiety is present, depression is too. Okay, 50% of the time. So that's why they ask these hand in hand. Okay. Quadrant 3, there's a fixed set of questions with fixed responses, which are intended to endorse symptoms. So these are best taken from symptom criteria. So you're reading the DSM and you're coming up with, so you're looking for the criteria. So when you do have depressive incidents, do you feel sad more days than not? So that's one of the criteria for depression, is you feeling more sad than happy. So you want to ask them, and so how are they going to answer that question? Have you lost pleasure in other things, right? So then you're basing your questions upon the criteria. And then quadrant 4, the DSM and most third-party payers indicate that the treatment is not medically necessary, even if symptoms endorsed substantiate a diagnosis if there is no evidence of significant distress or impairment. So that's what we kind of talked about. Somebody could have ailments, but if it's not distressing their lives in some certain way, it's not something that is an impairment, if that makes sense. So then you ask questions like, how is this affecting your work, your social life, your marriage, your family, all of those? And if there is issues during that, then we can diagnose it and work with it. There's a biopsychosocial assessment as well, and that assessment refers to a series of questions that asked at the beginning of the treatment of the individual to obtain information about their physical, psychological, and social issues. So it's like an all-encompassing thing. So what we're trying to figure out during this part is it nature or is it nurture or both? So was it something in my environment growing up, or is it something that maybe within the culture that's happening, or within maybe where I live? I've got PTSD because I live in Detroit, Michigan, and there's a lot of gunfire. Or Kansas City, Missouri. So whatever, wherever is that. So maybe I have PTSD for that reason. So is it a cultural thing? You're just trying to find out a lot about them. Is it genetics? So we're asking them a lot of questions about their family background, their social background, things like that too. So the psychosocial assessment has to do with their family history, their medical history, their education, and employment history. Why do you think education and employment history makes a big difference?
I would say how long they've stayed with something.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency.
And it could be the environment of that employment.
Disruption of life.
Yeah.
Generally would say I dropped out of school, I can't
Yes.
hold a job,
Yes.
dysfunction of some sort.
Yeah. Or if I went through college and got my doctorate or whatever, it means that you've got staying power and all this stuff too.
Yeah.
So, and it could, so it could signal, what kind of job you're supposed to have or things like that too. Yeah, good. What's their alcohol and their drug history? What's their legal history? Have they been in and out? So if you're looking for antisocial behavior, and you may see things of that, so how many times have they been in and out of jail? Things like that too. What's their prior health treatment? I always ask them, have you seen a counselor before? What was that for? And we always have it on our paperwork too. And who was the counselor too? Because that'll give a lot of information of, okay, I know what this counselor does. They do a lot of work with substance abuse or something like that too. So, and then what kind of medication This is very, very important, is understanding the medication that they're taking at that time. So if somebody tells me they're on Celexa or Cymbalta or something like that, I know there's probably some sort of depression or anxiety that's going on. If they're on, I forgot what it's called, Sequinol or something like that, that's for bipolar, so
Paxil.
yeah,
My
Paxil or
brother's
something.
on there.
Yeah, so just different types of information that you can get from medications. So then there's the flow chart in here, what you should do. So the screening for the ethical and legal issues, that could be on the phone right up front, because if there are legal and ethical issues with seeing this person, we don't want to do that, and we want to hand them to the correct person. So we do a clinical assessment in the interview, then we make our diagnosis, and then we do the intervention and the treatment planning. And then either A, we do a referral, because if we get to a certain point where we're done and they need to go to another, maybe an in-treatment or something like that, we discharge them to that, or we refer them to some other place, or we are done with them and then we discharge them. And then we want to have a consultation with others or our supervisor when we are doing our treatment planning, so that we know we're on the right course. Okay? That's where knowing others is really going to be important. At Abundant Life, we have it's called the Grace Room, and that's our collaboration room where everybody comes in and they talk about their cases and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think? What have you seen in the past? Things like that, too. Okay. So flow of the intake, right? So the intake is one of the most important parts, because you're going to get a lot of information from them. So make sure that they understand the confidentiality of the sessions. Everything that they say is going to stay within that room unless we are mandated reporters. So as being a mandated reporter, if they're talking suicide, homicide, child abuse, child neglect, anything like that, elder abuse, neglect, those we are mandated to report. So we have to report those. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So talk about confidentiality. We make them feel comfortable. We go through intake, and then we allow them questions. So, like, tell me about a time. You guys have been to the doctor, right? So, what makes a good doctor?
I really don't go to the doctor.
Okay. All right.
So I'm actually like the last person. I don't even have like a regular doctor.
Okay. All right.
I just don't get sick or anything.
Well, that's a good thing. Yeah. Knock on wood. That's right. Well, let me. I'll kind of. What makes a good doctor for you?
Well, first of all, knowledgeable
Knowledgeable. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, honest maybe.
Honest. Okay. Okay. To the point. Is that what you're kind of saying? So they're going to be honest with you if they see something.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me kind of go through. I had a doctor growing up, and he would come in and he'd spend a minute with you, and then he's on to the next one.
Oh.
That's how they make their money, right? The more people they can jam in an hour, the more money they're going to make. Then I grew up, and I phoned this place where my insurance was. I got to a nurse practitioner. So I went in to see her. She was really motherly, and she listened to me. She spent time with me and all that. And she made me feel very comfortable. Guess what? She was my doctor until she retired. She just retired. But she would answer my questions. I could call her, all of these things. So she just retired. And then I was looking for another doctor to go in. And they said, well, here's this doctor. And this was like May 1st, and they said you can't get in till June 30th or something like that. So 2 months. I'm like, nah, I need in now. I just can't wait. And so they go, oh, we do have this person who's a nurse practitioner, right? Yeah. I'm like, let's go. And you can see her Monday. I said, sold. So I go in there, guess what? She was almost the exact same as the other person. Very personable, took time with you.
Right, nurse practitioner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the difference between a nurse practitioner and a doctor is a nurse practitioner just generally can't prescribe the medication. It has to go through the doctor,
Gotcha.
who's maybe her supervisor or whatever. But this person's been a nurse practitioner for, like mine was for 30, 40 years. And then this one's been for 13 to 15.
Wow.
So they just aren't a doctor yet, So they do a lot of the same things. So anyway, they just made you feel safe and secure, and they took the time and all that. So that's what our job is too, as counselors, is to create that environment for them. And then the importance of being honest. There you go. And the importance of following the plan and the process. We want to follow the plan and process because if we say that we're going to do these things, we want to follow that so that they're following it too, but they can see, hey, this person is following. When you do counseling, I always say this is trust the process, right? So there's a process of things. We got to trust that process, right? So Kosei went through this class, helping skills. So that's another thing. So helping skills are attending behaviors that we use within the room, okay? It's our eye contact, it's our body posture, it's our voice and our tone, it's our verbal tracking. There's a thing called solar, where you sit squarely, open posture, lean towards them. Eye contact, so keep eye contact and you relax. So see how, the counselor's on the left there. So see how she's sitting right here? So that's solar, right? She's upright, she's keeping eye contact with them, she's leaning forward, all of those things. So we're doing that so that we're engaged with them. So if I'm just sitting back like this, they're going to think, well, he doesn't care about. But if I'm like really interested in keeping, that contact with them, then they're engaging back with us, okay? So that's very important. See, it's just these little things that make the important
They
difference.
matter to people.
Oh, yeah. And to get information from people too as well. So other helping skills, clarifications, what did you mean by that? Paraphrasing, so you're kind of repeating back to them so that you, in your own words so that they understand that you understand what they just said. Reflections of their feelings, summarizing, and then silence is a big one, right? So I may ask a question and here's one big thing. You might have a person who's a big processor, meaning they have to think through things a lot. So it may look like they've maybe just have answered their question fully, but they're still processing through things, and they may say something later. So I use silence a lot, or clarifying questions to make sure that they're done. But, so that's one big thing, is being comfortable with silence. Okay? Learn that through sales, right? So in sales, you ask a question and you wait for them to answer, because in sales they say the person who speaks first loses. Right?
I remember that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the MSE is the mental status examination, right? So what we're doing are doing clinical observations within this examination, right? So we're looking at their appearance. How are they groomed? What's their hygiene like? Especially if we've seen them before. Are they coming in disheveled? How is it different from the last time we saw them? What's their activity level? Do they have odd mannerisms? Do they have symptomatic movements of some certain thing? Are they not keeping good eye contact with you? What's their speech like? Is it slurred? Is it fast? Is it slow? If it's fast, maybe, if they're bipolar, they're in a manic state. We had a person come in and it was it was wild to see them because they were in a manic state for quite a while. And then you could see them when they weren't in one. And the difference in the way that they talked and the way they addressed people and things like that too. So what's their attitude towards the examiner? Are they hiding things from you? Are they not keeping that eye contact like you just said? Are they guarded? Are they hostile? Because there could be lots of different things that are going on if they're hostile with you, and maybe they're not usually like that. So what's their stream of consciousness like? Are they blocked, slowed, average, rapid, loose? Are they thinking clearly? Are they expressing themselves well? What's their thought content, right? What kind of things are they thinking about? Paranoid? Are they, how do they process that, right? What's their affect? And that's how they display themselves. Is their affect flat or blunted, or is it congruent? Are they one way one time, or are they one way another time, even within the same session, right? So we talked about being borderline. They're up, they're down, all within a small period of time. Okay, and what's their mood? Is it dysphoric, euphoric? Are they irritable? How are they coming across to you? So sensory, and what's their cognition? So what's their reality to life in the moment? Are they able to be present with you in that moment? What's their orientation? So are they oriented with you? Or, are they being able to think clearly? Are they speaking clearly? Things like that too. What's their concentration like? Are they able to complete sentences? Are they able to think through things with you? If you ask them a question, are they able to think through things and give you questions in a coherent way? What's their memory like? Are they providing you with the information they are? Abstraction, insight. What's their intellectual functioning? So we're just looking at a lot of different ways and viewing them in the sense of their body language and stuff is going to really tell you a lot too. Are they nervous? Are they moving their body around a lot? I do have kind of an example of that in a second. So here's what else I look for. What their body language is telling them, but also, how open they are to the discussion, right? Their eye contact, how much thought they're putting into their words. Also, how attached they become. For me, attachment is a big thing too. So there's different types of attachment. There's secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant, and dismissive. So that type of attachment style is going to also help you in determining other types of, anxiety, depression, things like that too. And do they become attached to you, or do they avoid you, or not, right? So that's very important to see what the relationship starts like. Psychological capacities, can they view themselves or others in a complex, stable, or accurate way? That's their identity, right? Can they maintain intimate, stable, and satisfying relationships? Do they have experience in self and perceive in others the full range of age expected affect? To regulate, and can they regulate themselves, their emotions and things like that too? Okay, all right. So that's what we're going to go through. So I want to take you through, and this will be the last part that we'll spend, but take you through what it looks like when you get somebody all the way from a phone call all the way through to the treatment plan. Fair? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me bring up. So the first thing is the phone intake. So when we have somebody call in to Abundant Life, we have a person named Larry who answers the phone.
Larry, good name.
Yeah, it is.
Guy. Hey, Larry.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you in California on a beach?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So he answers the phone, and he'll say, "Hey," they'll say, "Hey, we need to schedule a time," and then he'll go, "Okay, perfect. I want to schedule with the correct person. So I've got some questions I want to ask you," and so he'll take them through. What was the date and time that they called? Who was the person taking the information, so that you'll know, hey, this person took the information. I can go ask them questions. What were their names? Are they a member of Abundant Life? That's important because, hey, they're going to be in our database for one, but then it shows, hey, what their religion's kind of like too. Not that that's the most important thing, but if they're Baptists and from Abundant Life, then we kind of know what their thinking patterns are or whatever. Not totally, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get all their contact information. Then we go down to what's their presenting issues. Why are they coming in? And this will just be a sentence, anxiety, depression, marital problems, whatever it is. It's just going to be something very, very small. So then he's going to ask them, are there concerns for suicide or harming yourself or violence or any type of abuse in your family, right? So if there's thoughts of suicide, he's going to ask then, is there a means? Do you have a way of doing it? And do you have a plan to do it right now? Because if so, we want to get them help immediately, right? Not necessarily with a counselor from Abundant Life, but 911 or police or somebody or a hospital or something. We want to get them to the proper people that can help them in that moment. And so, but if there's thoughts of suicide, we can put that down there because a lot of people have those thoughts, but they're not going to carry it through, right? Are there any concerns for drug or alcohol problems, okay, in the home? Is this a court-ordered or court-related matter, okay? So we tell them we don't accept court-related, but we have partners that do, okay?
Why is that?
For one, we're working with a lot of interns in there, and we don't want to have them do the court-related, and really we're not geared for it, meaning there's, court-related would mean that you're going to have somebody who's going to get on a stand and they've been there before and things like that. So we want to, if it is court-related, there's a lot of things that go along with it. Is they don't want to be in counseling. They're going because they're being mandated to be there. Well, there's better facilities that can help them for people that are mandated that don't want to be there. We're there to help.
Well, and only that, also, wouldn't that require like possibly the counselor to be subpoenaed? Then
Yes,
take
it could.
away time from the center.
Absolutely. That plus, it should really be with a person that has been there before. Yeah, type of thing. So there's a lot of different reasons around it. But,
Sure.
So type of counseling that they need, is it families, couples, is it relational or individual? What's the relationship to the client that they have? Is it their child, spouse? Because if it is one person calling in and they go, I want my son to come in and we ask them, well, how old is your son? He's 20. Okay, he'll need to call in. Okay? Because that's breaking confidentiality right there if they make it. And so the son will have to call in because he's not a minor anymore. Okay? Then, is it a student, intern, blah, blah, blah. Then who it was assigned to, what time are they coming in, all those things. So that's the phone. So when they call in, that's the phone information that they have. Okay, so the very first meeting that we have with them, here's our informed consent. So we're going to go through there, and this is saying, hey, everything we talk about is confidential. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but it kind of goes through everything. Tells them that we're mandated reporters right here, okay? And that we're telling them up front, so if they say anything that says, I'm going to kill somebody, or I'm thinking of killing myself, or something like that, we have to report that. And then we tell them, once they say something or do something or whatever, I have to report that. So we tell them up front. So a lot of things in here about
That would be
procedure.
if they were currently being sexually abused too, right? Like any crime was being committed against them? Like,
Yeah, especially children.
That's what, yeah, we had to be,
Yeah.
I mean.
Absolutely. So anything with children. So here's the thing is we don't, I mean, we can call the police or whatever. Generally, we call a hotline.
Right.
And so I'll call the hotline and say, hey, here's a hypothetical. I have something like this, right? What's the law say I have to do with this? And then they can tell you.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they'll say, hey, it sounds like a non-emergency thing, so go register it with our website and do that, because so they don't have to do it online. But if it's something that has to be taken care of right now, then we can hotline it right then. We give them all the information that we have. They take care of the issues. So, yeah, we train everybody on how to work through that. We have them put an emergency contact on here in case something happens, especially with suicide or something. Not that they're committing suicide, but if they call and they say, I'm feeling suicidal, and then they hang up on me, and I call back and they don't answer, then I'm going to call their emergency contact as well as 911 and things like that. So then just more information about, here's one we have in here is a no secrets policy. That's generally with couples. So saying, if there's infidelity in there and I'm seeing somebody separately, I don't want them to tell me, and then they're not going to tell their spouse that there's been infidelity, because how can you do couples counseling if there's already lies being done? Electronic communication, we have security cameras, and then I have them sign it. But here's where I really wanted to point out is, on this informed consent, we have all this information of hospitals and things like that, so that they have reference to call back to if they're feeling having drug and alcohol problems, or suicidal or homicidal or anything. They have plenty of
That's great.
people, okay? So that is the informed consent that we go through. So the other thing that we have them do, so when Larry takes their phone call, he's going to send them 2 sheets. That first sheet is that master informed consent. He's going to send that to them for them to read through, and I'm going to take them through that again. The next thing he's going to do is send them a personal and medical information sheet. So this is very important too. So you'll see that this is very long. It's 4 pages worth of information. But this is going to give you a ton of information that you need. So right up front, it's going to give all their personal information, their marital status and all that, employer, and so you get to know them kind of a little bit personally, and then what's their spouse information, right? If you're seeing them as couple. Then we want to know who are the other people living in their homes. And we're asking this because then we can see how many children they have, how old they are, what's their relationship to you. So then we can see if it's a blended family, if they're all blood, what's kind of going on within the family, right? So in case of emergency, who do I contact, right? So that's in there. So we want to know who their primary care physician is. This is showing them, do they go see a doctor, right? So if Kevin comes in, that's going to be blank, right? So we don't want to see that. We want to know that they're taking care of medical issues if there are any.
I have had some physicals.
I'm just kidding.
Clean bill of health.
You're right. No, I'm just kidding, right? So no, but really, we're just looking at, are they seeing a doctor?
Yeah.
And blah blah blah. I'm giving you grief.
I love it.
So, but date of the last physical exam, and Kevin's going to put in here when I was 3 years old, right?
Never.
Okay. So, but then we could see, okay, if something's going on with anxiety, depression, blah, 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 we may want to send them to a doctor. So then list any medical or physical problems that we have. Have I ever been hospitalized? Have I had surgeries? Why do we want to know these things, you think?
Because the physical could cause some sort of mental disorder.
Yes, absolutely. Because then it says below there, list any prescriptions that we have. So prescriptions, drug interactions can happen and cause mental illnesses, right? Even if it's just temporary, it can cause mental illnesses. So this is going to have so much information that we need in here. Okay? Then we get down to what are my health habits and my personal safety, right? Do I exercise? What's my diet like? How much caffeine do I drink? Right? Mm-hmm. Do I drink coffee, tea, cola? Right? So really, if I'm looking at that, how many colas do I drink, right? But cola has a lot of sodium in it. It's not very good for you. So I do drink maybe one of these a day. If I don't drink coffee or anything like that. So that's my caffeine.
You're doing all right.
Yeah. So, but how many cups of coffee do I drink? So this is going to tell you how much caffeine is going into their body and things like that too. Then alcohol. Because okay, so going back to caffeine, talking about that. So what if they're really anxious? And I'm looking at that. Well, they drink 10 cups of coffee a day. That's going to contribute a lot to it, right? So all of these things are really going to help us figure things out. How much alcohol do they drink? If so, what kind? How many drinks per week? So this is going to show us things too, like if they have some kind of something going on over time, and then we look and they're drinking 10 beers a day or something, that's going to tell us a lot, right? Have you ever considered stopping? We asked them that because if they're having problems stopping, then maybe there's an alcoholism problem, and we want to get them to the proper help for that too. And that may contribute a lot to their depression, okay? Do you have blackouts? That's going to tell us how much they drink, right? Do you binge? Do you drive while drinking? What's that going to? So if we're asking, if they're driving while drinking, then we can look at some things like bipolar, personality disorders, things like that too, because A, they're going against the law, but they're also doing things that may put them in harm, others in harm, or maybe a product of a mental illness. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many DUIs have you had? Things like that. Is there a history of alcohol in your family? Problems in your family. Do you use tobaccos? Chews, cigarettes, pipe, so on. If so, how many years? Drugs, same thing with alcohol, right? Gambling. Sex, are you sexually active? Do you have any concerns about your sexual activity? Females only, have you had an abortion? So why do we ask some of these questions here, you think? Are you sexually active? Do you have any concerns?
I mean, that could possibly go to control, I guess, whether or not you're led by impulse.
Yeah.
And that just attributes to like narcissism. I mean, just some disorders. I think I can't remember which one exactly now, but sexual activity was part of one of them.
Yes, and so even in bipolar too, in a manic state, it could be part of it too. There's
right.
There could be a lot, and then histrionic, and and some of the other types of personality disorders or so on. But then if there's a lack of sexual drive too, that could be in depression and anxiety too. It could be part of, a medication I'm taking, right? So if they see this and they're not sexually active, then I want to look at their medication. So is it maybe caused by medication, right? So maybe the doctor has to change their medication, there's just so much that we have to look at. I think what I'm trying to just get across too is there's so many areas that we have to look at to get the most information so that we can make the best and accurate diagnosis. Personal safety, any abuse, physical abuse, emotional neglect, so on. Are there legal issues that you're going through, especially right now? And there could be, custody or divorce problems going on right now, and maybe that contributes to what they're having. Then we get into the family history. What's the age of your father and mother? How about when they passed, right? Here's my siblings, grandmother on both sides of the family, children and their age. Mental health, is there stress and major problems for you? Do you feel depressed? Do you feel stressed? Are you suicidal now? Do you have any trouble sleeping? Things so going on. Even with this, that could be with anxiety, depression, but could also be with medication and things like that too. So there's so much in here. Here's another thing that's so important. So you're going to get into the primary reasons for seeking services with Abundant Life, right? So they're going to check every box where they're having problems, and then that's going to go on and help you in your diagnosis as well. Spirituality, so how much spirituality do you want within the sessions? None too heavy biblical, right? Do you want to pray in the sessions? And so some people may come in as, yes, I want this, but I don't want to pray because maybe I'm having, I've talked with people grieving, and maybe they've had incidents of somebody dying in their family or whatever, and they're mad at God or whatever. No, I'm not going to. So then that'll help us figure out things too, what's going on in their lives, spiritual wise. So lots of good information in here.
Thorough.
So any questions about this at all?
Yeah, that's pretty thorough.
It is thorough. Yeah, that's the good thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one that we would take them through, intake and diagnostic form. So with this, you put all your information in, but here's where all of those questions that we're kind of answering, this is where we put it in, right? So what's the client's presenting concerns? How long have they been experiencing this? What's the severity of it? What's the impairment in their life of this functioning, right? Are they able to function? Why are they seeking? What's the importance of them seeking help now, right? So we're going to take all these notes. And so what I like about this is it gives you, as you go through all of these, it gives you a process to go through, and it keeps you on track. So allowing you to not jump around and not miss any information. Okay? What are current stressors in my life? What's a typical day look like for me? I get up, I go to work for 13 hours, and I come home and I go straight to bed. Okay, so why? So what, maybe I need money, or maybe I'm avoiding something, or there could be something happening in my life. So there's a lot of questions that could go along with that, right? What's the nature of my work? What are my interpersonal relationships like? So if I go to work and I hate it because I hate everybody there, or I don't get along with them, so that's going to lead to a lot of things, right? Or maybe I love it there, and I'm getting treated better at work than I do at home. So maybe
I'm going to stay there.
I'm going to stay there a lot of the time because I find purpose in my job or whatever, right? So yeah, lots of good questions that you could do. Then what are my stressors? And here's the most important part, I think, is what's my support system? Who is my support that I can go to? And then personal history, my family. Have you guys talked about a genogram? You know what a genogram is? I know you have. You've done that.
Yeah, I have, but not in this class.
Right, yeah. Okay, so a genogram is something where I look at everybody that has been in my family before. So I start with maybe grandparents. Maybe I just go through 3 layers. Grandparents, parents, then me. So grandparents, they had whoever as children, What was their relationship? Did they
Okay.
die
Okay.
of anything? What did they die of? Was there mental illness? And then with parents, what was their relationship like to their siblings and to their kids? Was there mental illness there?
Just kind of drawing conclusions.
Yeah, so it's going to help you
Okay.
relate.
Okay.
Especially with couples, it's good to do it on both sides so they can see this was the environment I grew up in. So this is how so things go on. So their personal history, their family, their work, it was their physical or sexual abuse in their history, and are there financial problems, or are they okay financially? Because especially if it's a marriage and there's financial issues.
Top 3 fights, really.
Yeah, there could be lots of, and that could be the biggest issue that's causing everything. So medical and psychological history, talk to me about your past therapist. How long was that treatment? What did you do in that treatment? What was your perception of that treatment? I get so many people coming in, and I'll hear people say, that counselor wasn't any good. And I take that with a grain of salt, because people will come in and they're not ready to change, or they're not ready for counseling, but they'll blame it on somebody. So if somebody says a counselor's not good, I don't take that to heart. And they could say that about me, because maybe they weren't ready and I challenged them and that made them mad.
Yeah.
So I want to know what their perception of that treatment was, because if they do say something, okay, what are the reasons why that treatment didn't work, right?
Yeah.
Is it because it's their fault or not? Okay, so, and then medications, dosages, significant medical events in their history, things like that too, okay? What's their alcohol and drug use? I know that it was on that piece of paper, but we want to talk to them about it too. Because you know what? They're going to answer some of these things on that piece of paper, and they're not going to be truthful. I know that's a big eye opener, that people aren't going to be truthful, but people are not going to be truthful on everything. And so that's where I ask them questions, and I want to watch their body language. Types of drugs, alcohol, specific amount and usage. Ideations of self-harming or harming others, both now and in the past. And then what's their mental status, right? What's my diagnostic impression? What are their strengths? What are their liabilities? Then I'm going to use this part to conceptualize, right? So here's their appearance, here's their behavior, their affect and mood, my perception, what their perception of life is and all that, how their thinking was. And then here's my preliminary diagnosis, and I want to put differentials in there too. So then, for us, we have lead counsel, and then we have a supervisor. And I want that supervisor to sign it too, so that they can go through that with them, so that we're making sure that more eyes than just those two are on it. Cool?
Cool.
Any questions about this?
That's good.
Okay, we are hitting it. This is all good stuff. So, 2 more things that we'll go through. Then, once we're done with everything, now this is a session note that we're going to write after every time. So we put the date, we put the client's information, what session is this, 1, 2, 10, 15, 20, right? Who was present? Was it just the one person, or was anybody else in there? What was the length of the session? It could be, generally we want to put 50 minutes in there, or an hour. Maybe it was 10 minutes because they got angry and left, right? So then we're going to put that in the information. What was the start time? What was the stop time? Or maybe they were late. And we also want to see how often they're late. Okay, go ahead.
Are these all, this may be redundant, but are these all like actually like typed in the computer, or you guys have physical forms?
Well, both. Yeah, so it depends on how a person wants to keep a file. And so we have software that we can do these notes within, and it has all the questions in it too, just like it. But just doing it physical now, so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. Did we see them independently as a couple? Blah, blah, blah. Fee, did they pay? We want to know that. not be, for us, it's just, how did they pay, check, blah, 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 so that we can just keep good, accurate records, right? Because if you get audited and stuff like that, the state board wants to know, are you getting paid for this and how much and everything. What was the focus? What was an assessment? Are we still doing treatment planning? Are we working towards goals? Was there a crisis? Are we in crisis management? And then if we work through the goals, is there another? Maybe we're going to do another assessment. So I'm going to go back to a different assessment. Was there any change in the symptoms displayed, right? No change, or yes, there was changes, and it's below. So are there any identified risk? We can put not present at all, or yes, there was risk. They said, I have ideation of suicide, and so I'm going to make sure that I'm going to put it all in my notes and stuff like that too. So was there suicidality, intent to harm someone else or themselves, domestic violence, or was there child or elder abuse? And all of this stuff is reportable. Not so much domestic violence if it's with your spouse, but unless it's intent to harm and stuff like that too, okay? Goals. So each time we want to write down the goals were they addressed in this session, and because we just want to, measure them, right? And then was there progress displayed? And then what are the interventions that I used? So did I use, what type of theory? Did I use CBT, EFT, things like that? But what other interventions did I use? Did I use like coping skills? Like if somebody's having anxiety problems, did I use or present to them new coping skills and things like that too? Or
Meditation.
Meditation, or help them with a plan of how to do SMART goals or something like that, right? So then I sign it and file it, okay? And if I'm still with a supervisor, the supervisor signs it too, okay? So, okay, one last thing. And this is the treatment plan, okay? So with the treatment plan, this is usually done by the 4th or 5th session, probably the 5th. And this is where I start, okay, I've got my diagnosis, and I've done my research on that diagnosis and what's going to be best for the client. So then now I'm going to create a treatment plan that'll keep me on track and it'll keep them on track. So, and I'm going to have them sign this saying, here's what we're promising each other to do, and this is what we're going to concentrate on. So it keeps us focused on what their issues are, and so that we don't vary. Because, they can come in, you can ask them a question, and then within that moment, they may be avoidant, and so they'll get you off on a tangent on something else to avoid going into something that is going to cause them pain, right? That they don't want to address, okay? So I always bring them back to, hey, this is what the presenting issue is, and we said this is what we're going to work on and focus on. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we write down what's the presenting problem, what's going on. Maybe it's anxiety. What are the symptoms? Well, I can't sleep. I get agitated easily, and so on. Okay, so goals. We want to set goals. Well, my goal is I want to not feel anxious. I want to be able to go out socially, so I don't have that social anxiety. So what are my objectives? My objectives is, okay, if I don't want to feel anxiety, maybe I'm going to do medication. So I'm going to go to my doctor and do medication. And then I'm going to incorporate coping skills into my life and my day, and then something else. And those are the objectives to get through that goal. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So you'll have goals and you'll have an objective of each goal, okay? And then treatment modality, right? So with trauma, a treatment modality may be EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So that is really something that you can use with EMDR. You can use with trauma. So that's going to be my modality that I'm going to use, and that's just an example, right? Or treatment modality for anxiety could be CBT or whatever. So I'm going to use these things within CBT, and then I have them sign it. And then therapist signs it, and if I have a supervisor, they sign it too. Okay? Any questions about any of those? Okay. Pretty cut and dry?
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes.
It's going to be one of those things that when you're going through it, it's just becomes second nature to
Absolutely.
walk out.
Yeah, and here's another thing is you'll get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not saying you're going to put everybody in a box, but you'll get into a rhythm of a process that this works for me, and you're going to do these things.
Right.
But it's so that you want that rhythm and you want that process, so that you do collect all the information that you need and want during that time too. So why I spent the time on this is the most important part. Knowing your DSM is very, very important, but you always have this. You can always go through and read things. It's the questions to ask to get to the diagnosis that's the most important part. And the relationship that you build with them is the most important part. So we want trust, safety, security, and all those things so that they will work with us. Because if we can know this inside and out, but if we don't have that good relationship with them and are able to help them, it's not going to help them, if you will, or we're not going to be able to. So any questions over today or what Jeff went through, or?
That's good.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Just processing it, and I feel like I'm probably, as Kosei could say, better equipped to at least ask better questions. That's
yeah.
kind of where it starts, I think.
And really, that's the whole deal, because hey, we got Google, right, and we've got this, and so just asking the right questions to start formulating. Say, oh, here's this and this and this. So then we can go out and we can do research, and that's where it all comes. Then we've seen it in one aspect, and we're going to see it in another, and say, oh, I've seen that before.
And the research won't ever change. That's what's great about school, is it trains you how to research for later when you're going to be researching for diagnosis. And
absolutely.
So that's cool.
That's awesome. Cool. You have any questions?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right.
You are good.
Well, you're going to be teaching this the next go around. So
Yeah. We're going to fly you back.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Everybody online, I really appreciate you sticking in there. Phone number is 816-721-0355. If you have any questions, we would love to help. Jeff and I, of course, and you can send me an email, counselordouglas@gmail.com, if you have any questions like that too. So does one of you want to pray us out today, and we can wrap up? And pray us out?
You can do that?
I can.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dear God, Heavenly Father, I just, again, thank you for this time. Thank you for Doug and all of his insight and wisdom and passing that along to us. I pray for today that we can glorify you in everything we say and everything we do. I ask that we can take this information, Father, and just apply it to our lives, even right now. Everything we're learning, Father, there's no need to wait. You can, through your Holy Spirit, give us this wisdom now and just allow us to help people, put us in situations and give us opportunities to where we can encourage and love people right where they're at. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.